City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Good afternoon. It's the 3rd of December and you're welcome here in the room and online to this afternoon's meeting of the London Assembly's Environment Committee. Thank you very much for joining us today. This will be our second meeting regarding the expansion of heat networks in London, which obviously is part of an overall strategy to use waste heat but also to reduce fossil emissions. The focus is going to be understanding the practical challenges of building and extending low-carbon heat networks, as well as discussing heat network zoning. After we've had those discussions with two panels, we will then move on to having a discussion with the Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy, who will be sharing any insights he has from his recent visit to Brazil with the Mayor of London, and they went to Rio to attend the C40's World Mayors Summit, which was just before the C30, at the United Nations COP meeting, C30. And now, before we get started, can I just remind everybody to put your phones on silent, and if you have your phone, your electronic device on vibrate, do not put it immediately in front of your microphone. And if you need to move your microphone around, can you remember to pick it up by the base and not by the gooseneck, because we will charge you if you break it. And members of the public are encouraged to follow along this afternoon at London Assembly on various social media platforms. And if you're using X, you can use the hashtag Assembly Environment for this meeting. Now, before we move on to the main item on the agenda about heat networks, we have a couple of bits of business to cover. Could I ask our committee clerk, Sal Fazal, to confirm if we have any apologies for today's meeting?
Thank you, Chair. No apologies have been received.
Thank you. Item 2 is declarations of interest, which are on pages 1 to 4 of the agenda. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out in item 2? Great. Does anyone have any extra interest to declare that relate to this? No one's running a heat network somewhere that I need to know about? OK. 3, membership of the committee. Could I ask the committee to note the changes to memberships as agreed at the London Assembly plenary meeting on the 13th of November? And could I welcome Assembly Member Boff and Assembly Member Clark to the Environment Committee and the return of Assembly Member Prince? Item 4 is minutes, pages 5 to 108. Could I ask the committee to confirm the minutes of the meetings? There's 2 of them on the 16th of October and the 4th of November. And can I sign them as a correct record? Thank you. Summary list of actions. Could I ask the committee to note the completed and ongoing actions set out on pages 109 to 116? And could I also ask the committee about actions taken under delegated authority? Could you note the recent action taken by me in consultation with party group lead members to agree the letter to the Mayor of London regarding climate finance in London? Thank you. And could I also finally ask you to note responses to our outputs? We've had a response from the Mayor to our letter on London's plan for nature. Noted. Great. We're now at the item on heat networks. So, you are going to be our main topic of conversation. No, not you personally, but heat networks. I'd like to introduce and I'd like to thank Anthony Meanwell, who is Head of Heat Zone Development at E.ON, Ian Guest, who is the Technical Director of Energetic, and Charlotte Owen, who is the Growth Director at Hemico. And I'm sure they've got much to chat about amongst themselves because they've got quite some crossover there. But thank you so much. You're very welcome to be here as our expert guests. So I'm going to start with an open question to all of you. From your experience, what is needed to create and expand a successful heat network? And I'm going to start with Anthony and then work along. So, Anthony, over to you.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. I think it's worth just taking a little step back and just understanding what the context looks like from a London perspective. So we understand the government national policy is that by 2050, 20% of heat should come from heat networks. And that represents, from a UK perspective, about £100 billion investment and a 290,000 green job opportunity.
I just ask you to move the microphone slightly closer.
And I will do it by the base.
Yeah,
and not by the gooseneck.
No.
Because I do not wish to pay. So if we then look at that from a London perspective, so probably about 40% of heat can come from heat networks in London, and that represents a £40 billion investment opportunity and 120,000 green jobs opportunity. So I think it's really important that we look at it not just as a decarbonisation opportunity, but a growth and productivity opportunity for London. And if we just look at some big numbers in terms of what does London need from a heat point of view, what are we trying to do? We're trying to decarbonise the heat that heats our homes and heats our businesses. And London needs 70 terawatt hours of heat. And if we look at the waste heat that is available in London, and I think it's worth putting that into context, and there is a recent report that's been done by Buro Happold on behalf of the GLA, which was published a few months ago. So we have about 5 terawatt hours of heat available from energy from waste plants. We have 10 terawatt hours of heat available from mainly Thames Water and its wastewater treatment works. Some of it's from sewers, but the vast majority is through the wastewater treatment works. And we have another 10 to 15 terawatt hours available from current and planned data centres. So almost half of the heat that London needs can come from waste heat sources. And some of those waste heat sources are a higher temperature than others. So it represents a really good opportunity for London from a growth and productivity point of view, and it represents a really good opportunity for London to utilise the waste heat that it produces just about going through its daily course of business. So to answer the question, I think for us, one of the things that's really important for London is that it takes a strategic approach to developing this infrastructure. And up until now, I don't think it's done that. So if you want to utilise that waste heat, then we need to take a strategic approach to that. Similarly, London and UK PLC as a whole can't afford for the electricity grid to be upgraded, for existing gas mains to be replaced, and for new heat networks to be built. And certainly from a London perspective, it doesn't make sense to do that in every single borough. It needs to take a strategic approach so that in some areas, yes, we'll upgrade the electricity grid. In other areas, we may upgrade the gas grid. But in other areas, it will be heat networks. And that needs some strategic coordination. So whilst the GLA has done some really good things, so if I look at the infrastructure team and the street works team as part of that, and the coordination of multi-utility work, that's been very successful. And that's good. They've commissioned the local area energy plans and the regional local area energy plans to look at how does that work across a region. But I think it now needs to take a step further in terms of how does it strategically coordinate that. So it's really positive to see the development of the LIFT, the London Infrastructure Framework. So really excited to see the draft report that's going to come out in January that's going to start to look at how do we pull that infrastructure requirement together. But I think really keen that through that process, we then end up with a short list of really strategic projects that are going to help drive us forward, of which a number of those should contain a strategic approach to heat networks.
I mean, I was also going to ask you what are the barriers to expanding the heat networks in London, but I think you've sort of been answering both, really.
So, yeah, I think the 2 points that I will mention briefly. So, those numbers that I talked about at the start, that growth opportunity needs the new regulation coming in from government. So it needs the new heat network zoning regulation. And that regulation, so we're certainly expecting it sitting on this side of the table that it will have a strong requirement for customers to connect to a heat network and to take the heat, and also those with waste heat to sell their heat to that heat network, and that there to be few exceptions to that process. Otherwise, it's incredibly difficult to build financially robust commercial models that will support the investment case. So that's a barrier. If we don't get that right, that's absolutely a barrier. And I would encourage the Mayor and the Deputy Mayors to continue the lobbying of DESNZ, Department of Business and Trade and Treasury to support the deployment. I think the other one for me is London not having a long-term plan. This cannot be done piecemeal if we are to drive a new sustainable infrastructure into London.
Yeah, we had some really interesting points being made by the Heat Trust about if we are going to do those encouragements, what are the consumer protections and things like that, and some of the changes are coming through there as well. So I think this is a very fast-moving picture, but I think those are really well-made points. Ian, do you want to challenge the points that Anthony's been making, or do you want to build on them?
I think build on, and there's nothing I disagree with in terms of what Anthony says, so I'll try and dovetail perhaps with something new. I think leading on from what Anthony said, you've got to get the heat to the customer. It's expensive to deliver that in London roads. It causes traffic chaos when you're doing it, which is not very popular with local businesses and the public, of course, trying to get to work on public transport. So it's a combination, I think, of money to make sure that infrastructure is put in the ground at the right time. What drives that? Customers, buildings being built, customers who need a new connection. What's happened in the last 12 years since I've been at Energetic is that there's been lots of promises of new developments coming along, a huge number of additional connections that we can build a financial model to demonstrate that what we're doing is going to work long term and we're going to become financially stable. I'd say that if I look at the original plan in 2017, when we should have had 6,000 connections by now, new connections, we're at 2,000. That shows the delay that's been caused by many factors, Brexit, then pandemic, then obviously interest rates and market forces. So if people aren't building, despite the encouragement from the GLA and from councils, then we have a problem because there's a financial hole in our models. So build, and then we've got a financial model that works to connect. Because if you're investing 100 million, 200 million pounds, it hurts a lot if you can't get revenues to obviously feed into that capital expenditure and financial cost. So that's the first thing. The second thing is in terms of existing housing stock, let's not forget 90%, 95% of our housing stock exists today. It's not new build. We keep focusing on new build, but they can look after themselves generally with the new building regulations. So how do we retrofit? You've got to make sure that opportunities aren't missed. So if I take a simple example, if council buildings can connect, but then decide to go an alternative route, let's say heat pumps, and you miss that catalyst to be able to extend, it gets harder and harder to find new catalysts that build to a sufficient number to make that extension financially viable. So you risk, if you don't ensure that there is some form of cohesion in the policy, of losing potential connections which are, particularly if they're of a large consuming organisation or business rather than just domestic houses, you miss the opportunity to say, okay, that would have allowed us to, in terms of jigsaw puzzles, move our way towards that part of London. So I do think that whilst I'm not suggesting that heat networks are the only solution, anybody think there's a silver bullet out there is mistaken. There's a mix of things we need. But if you allow people just to do what they want and you lose big opportunities, particularly large businesses, to other solutions other than heat networks, it makes it much harder to get there financially.
It's quite hard to persuade people to invest 100 million or 200 million or more if they're then only going to get 2,000 of the 6,000 customers that they were anticipating joining onto the network. I actually had this conversation with Chris Thornbury, and obviously E.ON can look to invest in lots of other different countries as well. It doesn't have to invest anything in the UK, whereas I think Energetic's a bit more geographically focused, shall we say. Charlotte, do you want to add to the points that Anthony and Ian have made so strongly?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with what they've said. I think to answer your question of what is needed to expand heat networks, the answer is we need to make it more affordable for people to join heat networks. Ultimately, it is currently more expensive if you are somebody who's currently on a gas boiler to move to a heat network. And so what we need is to give people an economic, rational reason for joining heat networks, and the answer is that we need to make it cheaper. Most of that sits with central government and industry to jointly deliver together. The industry has made a commitment to reduce capital costs by 7.5%. But we need to see government action alongside that to also drive down the cost of heat. That said, there are things that sit within the control of the GLA and within the control of local authorities across London that also influence the cost of heat that end customers pay. For example, lane rental, which is something that we're seeing some London boroughs start to implement. Heat networks are subject to lane rental. We fundamentally have to dig up roads to be able to install this infrastructure. Lane rental costs add 10% to the capital costs of delivering a heat network. That is 10% that is then passed through to every single customer that joins a heat network. So there are many things that are actually within the control of local authorities and within the GLA that can help to reduce the cost of developing these heat networks in a way that ultimately gets passed through to customers.
So can I just unpack then what you're saying? You're saying both the cost of the initial connection, which might be more expensive because of the need to dig up a highway and have to pay for the privilege of doing that, lane rental, but also the cost of the heat then once it's being delivered to the person on the network could potentially be lower. And you're saying both of those, initial connection and then ongoing connection, needs to be more affordable.
Yes, exactly. So customers that join heat networks pay a connection charge, that is the upfront cost to join a heat network, a standing charge or a fixed charge, that is the ongoing cost of being connected to a heat network, and then a variable charge, which is essentially a cost pass-through of energy costs and the operational costs of the network. We need all three of those things to be cheaper than they currently are. There is government grant funding that helps to deal with the capital costs of connecting to a heat network. So the Green Heat Network Fund, which has benefited several heat networks across London, including 3 that we are involved in ourselves. In fact, that's not true. It's 5 that we are involved in ourselves. So Green Heat Network Fund has an enormous help, but we do need to see action to reduce the standing charges and variable charges as well. And a large part of that sits with government in that one of the major drivers of why heat networks are more expensive than being on a gas boiler is that the heat networks we are deploying are electrically led heat networks. They are air source heat pump led heat networks or ground source heat pump led heat networks or water source heat pumps. And they are fundamentally running on electricity. Electricity is more expensive than gas. And one of the core reasons why electricity is more expensive than gas is because of non-energy costs, which is essentially government taxes and levies that are sitting on top of electricity. If those taxes and levies can be moved off of electricity and put somewhere else, at least for heat networks, not necessarily for electricity more generally, then we can pass through those savings to customers. Heat networks one day will be the cheapest way for energy to be supplied to any building in the country. That is because heat networks are currently the cheapest way to decarbonise. It is just when you start comparing heat networks with gas, that's when it starts to look less affordable.
And it just also seems more efficient to be reusing the waste heat. From my perspective, it just seems crazy not to do that. But Andrew, did I see that Assembly Member Boff?
Yes. Mr. Guest, you said that the number of connections was planned at 6,000, but only 2,000 have been delivered by now. Could you just elaborate on what the reasons for that are?
Market forces. So, we're not in control of developers or the number of houses they build. So most networks are initially driven as a catalyst through new development, not retrofit of existing buildings. So you will talk. We obviously we're part of the Enfield Council. So Enfield Council were due to build Brilliant Water, 10,000 homes. You look at their programme with a estate called Joyce and Snells, 6,000 by 2026 was the plan in 2016. We were told to get ourselves ready, don't be late, ensure you can serve heat to the developments that require it. So we've embarked on an infrastructure project that delivers that. We've mitigated some of the costs when we saw the delays, but fundamentally, Meridian Water is well behind schedule. It's not really the council's fault, it's market forces. If you can't get people to buy houses, I mean, you can have so many council homes and housing associations, but fundamentally that needs at least 50% needs to be from the private sector and leasehold, freehold purchases. That's not happening. You know, interest rates are too high. People are waiting for it to come down. Developers are saying, well, if we can't get the first phase sold off, why would you start phase 2? So at the end of the day, market forces drive new build, and GLA try very hard to, encourage developers to build to meet demands, as do councils, I might add. But at the end of the day, unless buildings are built by developers and sold, and obviously some are council housing or housing association homes, then we've got nothing to connect to.
So we're not building enough houses fast enough?
Well, I wouldn't go quite that far. That's a different topic. But I'd say that from those that were planned...
Well, the customers live in houses.
Yes, when
homes.
When we built our financial model, we were told that this was the expectation of new build homes in Enfield driven by the council, not by private sector, but by the council. And so we built our model based on that, thinking that it was in their gift to deliver those houses. But since then, we had Brexit, we had the pandemic, and we've now got high interest rates, and that has severely reduced the number of houses that have been built compared to that planned in 2016.
And for that reason, we're not building enough houses fast enough?
For us, that's correct.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. It was Assemblymember Mahfouz is going to pick up the questioning now.
Thank you, Chair. So we're going to move on to heat networks zoning. First question for anybody who wants to chip in first. The government has previously consulted, of course, on proposals for heat network zoning and launched a series of pilots, the AZZPs. What will it take for a heat network zoning to be successful in London? What can we learn from that so far? And I will come back to you, Charlotte, in terms of specific examples of the OPDC and the SWAN network going forward as well. So I don't know if you want to come.
Yeah. I think that it's stopping people using gas boilers. It's fairly simple. As long as gas boilers are able to be used or replaced at the end of their life, then, as Charlotte said earlier, it's a challenging landscape in terms of competitive costs between what we can deliver, even with waste heat, and what gas boilers and the gas infrastructure can deliver in terms of a cost per kilowatt hour to the customer. Now, you know, our reason to be here is to decarbonise, and so if we think that gas is the counterfactual, as it's called, that we're compared against forever, then we're in trouble. We are in trouble. But we take gas as a counterfactual today, predominantly to show that we are competitive with gas. We may not be cheaper, but we're competitive. But we have waste heat. We're a very privileged company in that we have a waste heat source, and you know, Leonie's quite right. Waste heat is the obvious solution in London, and we do have plenty of it, as Anthony said earlier. But you've got to capture it, and you've got to distribute it to the right places, which has a cost. But at the end of the day, zoning will work as long as somebody somewhere brings in legislation to say that you can no longer replace your gas boiler at the end of its life. So they have to look at the alternatives. I'm not saying it has to be heat networks. That would be anti-competitive. But you've got to look at this perhaps on a level playing field. If we're competing against heat pumps or other solutions that are low carbon, then I think we're in good shape. If we're always going to compete against gas and gas boilers, it's a challenge, a real challenge.
So just on that point, Ian, if we sit here today and my gas boiler broke down, what percentage of Londoners could move to an alternative in terms of a heat network? I think
that's a fair question. You know, you've got to be there to be able to serve the customers. We're at Enfield. We're trying to expand to Haringey, Waltham Forest, Hackney, with the support of the GLA and DESNZ, to be fair, but we are predominantly in Enfield. And so at the moment, Enfield customers can rely on a connection in quite a significant area of the borough, but we couldn't serve customers outside of the borough yet. But the expectation is in 10 years' time, we'll definitely be in Haringey, Waltham Forest and Hackney. So I think your point is that if you get a failure, you don't have an alternative today other than heat pumps, where would you go? But I think with planning, you can say that when your boiler does fail or need replacing, more to the point, in, say, 5, 10, 15 years' time, expect to connect to a different solution. Don't expect to continue to replace like with like.
And Anthony, did you want to answer that before we come to Charlotte? No? Okay. So, Charlotte, if you want to talk about that, but also in terms of the specific zones, you've got OPDC, Old Oak Common and Park Royal in my patch. You've also got the Swan network in South Westminster, which I visited recently. How will that impact in terms of our rollouts? What lessons have you learned so far?
Yep, sure. Yeah, so Hemico are delivering the South Westminster area network in a joint venture with Vital Energy. The Swan network, as we call it, will take waste heat from the River Thames, so it's ambient waste heat from the River Thames, from a water source heat pump on a novel floating barge, and it will supply heat into several of the universities and cultural organisations around the Strand initially. And one of the core things that we have learned from the development of this network is that it really matters to identify customers who are institutionally committed to decarbonisation. That is because joining a heat network is more expensive than being on a gas boiler, at least in the short term. Long term, we don't think that will be the case. If we look at the kind of economic case for joining a heat network over 50 years, we're expecting that actually being connected to a heat network will be a positive thing, but that is subject to government policy coming in. So at the minute, customers are having to make choices about the future of their heating in the absence of policy certainty and clarity about the future of their heating. So it's really important that you identify the buildings who are essentially willing and able to pay. They are the people and organisations that are institutionally committed to net zero, which is why it is things like universities, it is things like hotels who can sell a premium for a green room. These are the organisations that ultimately join heat networks. And I think one of the challenges that we see right across the country, and I will say it is less of a challenge in London just because the heat density in London is higher, but for London's outer boroughs and for the rest of the country, we will see a challenge if local authorities bring heat networks to market that are not reasonable to deliver at the minute, because you don't have those customers that are in a position where actually they want to pay the premium to be on a low carbon heat supply. To contrast that then with the OPDC heat network, which Hemico are delivering in partnership with OPDC. So this is it's called Open. That will take waste heat from local data centres to supply to connections in the area. That network is being anchored mostly by new build customers. So this is new build housing, shops, leisure centres and the like, that will fundamentally anchor the investment in the heat network there. And the reason that works is because new builds are required under planning and under building regulations to have a low carbon heat supply and under planning to connect to a heat network where one exists. I think one of the challenges that we have had is making the timelines of the heat network align with the timelines for the developers. It is much harder to encourage a developer to join a heat network when the heat network doesn't yet exist. The promise is the network will be there by the time that they switch heat on, but you're asking them fundamentally to align their construction schedule with ours, and there are numerous things we can do to give confidence to developers that we will align with their timelines, that we will be able to have heat on when they need it, but we need cooperation from local authorities, which we're very fortunate to have at OPDC. We need cooperation from local authorities as the planning authority to encourage buildings to join heat networks, because they are what fundamentally anchor these networks. So I think the core thing from kind of what will make zoning a success is find the places where heat networks can overcome the cost challenges initially, and it is predominantly those buildings that are institutionally committed to net zero or are new buildings that are required to have a low carbon solution already.
So with the OPDC, you've got, as you say, like two very different juxtaposed places. So one is a mayoral development corporation, which obviously cuts across different boroughs, but a real drive to deliver this. You've got the data centres being built now, which obviously ahead of about the only thing that is being built at the moment, data centres left, right and centre. And so they'll be in place and ready to provide that heat network ahead of the homes that will be built in the coming years. And in South Westminster, you're looking at effectively a sort of retrofit for the properties that are there at the moment.
Yep.
The DESNZ has proposed, they obviously proposed themselves as the central authority on this topic. They've asked that boroughs take a lead in terms of zoning. You've all mentioned in terms of taking a more strategic London-wide approach and plan and view of how this is going to be rolled out. It's going to be done properly. What's your view on DESNZ's position on that in terms of boroughs taking a lead and using those sorts of examples of what's been successful so far?
Yeah, shall I go first while I've got the mic? So I think that it is right for local authorities to have a role in heat networks. The heat networks don't work without local authorities being involved and supportive, and that is because local authorities have a role in planning, in highways, and importantly, as a sort of local facilitator almost of these networks. Local authorities already hold a lot of the relationships that are needed to make heat networks work. They can help accelerate these development timelines by joining up dots, by making links in with other stakeholders and organisations that might join the heat network or enable its development. For example, OPDC support us with our engagement with HS2 and TfL because we need to ultimately cross several railway crossings as the network evolves. And I think there is a role for local authorities to play in terms of checks and balances on heat network development. I think, however, it does create some challenge for local authorities because what you are inherently doing is politicising the development of this infrastructure. It means that because local authorities need to make planning decisions on allowing energy centres to be built, even if you're not involved in a heat network integrally in its governance, you are making decisions on things like planning. And that does mean that local authorities get looked to by the local by the local public to say you've agreed to and supported this heat network. So to an extent, local authorities kind of inherently have a role to play. But I think it's really important that we equip local authorities with the resources that they need to do this well, that we share with them examples of how local authorities do work well with heat network developers, and I would certainly point to OPDC and Westminster for examples of that, and Worthing Borough Council on the South Coast. So I think broadly I agree with the government's proposals, but it really will come down to resourcing.
Thank you. And Anthony, if you could also bring in what you think the GLA should be doing that perhaps we're not in the mix at the moment.
Yeah, so support fully what Charlotte's just said, and I do think that there is certainly within London and the coordination that is needed across boroughs. So where you don't have the OPDC and that environment, then there's a part for the GLA to play, and I think there's also a part for London councils to play in terms of how they can support the local authority in that coordination piece and helping for that to be joined up. I would like just to make one point back on to the previous one around the AZP process. So just, I guess, a general, very welcoming of the approach from DESNZ to create the advanced zoning programme and to start to look at larger scale, more zonal scale heat networks. So it's good that we've got a number of those happening in London, because for us to get to a point where we can deliver low cost, low carbon heat, we have to take that bigger picture view. So whilst the AZP programme isn't perfect, and it was never meant to be perfect, it's the start of we're coming into a new world with new regulation. We're trying to start to look at building those larger scale networks. And so part of the programme was all around a test and learn and to start to build on that. So I welcome the fact that programme is in place. I welcome that it's trying to look at the bigger picture. And I would just re-emphasise again the point that I made earlier, that from a London point of view, to get to Charlotte's couple of points, we need to be delivering affordable, low carbon heat. So we've got to think bigger picture, and we've got to join those things together.
we will be talking about cost and pricing, so I don't want you to necessarily go straight into that because other people will ask you that. But anything from yourself, Ian?
I think I would, just from a coming from a council perspective here, there is 31 boroughs in London. 32, is it?
Boroughs, one corporation.
You know, you're asking for 32 or 33 zone coordinators that have a good knowledge of heat networks and understand how to ensure that they are expanded through their borough in a logical, holistic and coordinated way. And I would say that if I look back in my 20-year career in this industry, as opposed to 39 years in other parts of the industry, specifically district heating, the problem's been skills and knowledge. It's a bit of a black art, to be honest, and every borough that I've been involved with or tried to support whilst at Enfield has been crying out for support because they don't understand it. And of course, you can't make decisions as councillors if you don't understand something. So I think that it's, you know, it's easy to say zone coordinators are the right place for this to sit, and I do agree with that principally. I do believe that there's so much detail goes on in a borough. You do need that position to exist, as Charlotte says. But I do think the GLA have I was going to say responsibility, that's not right. They have the ability to enhance how this works by having a central skills support team that can stop 32 boroughs having to learn from scratch what this is all about.
Thank you very much.
Seems like a kind of sensible approach, really. 32 boroughs in the City of London learning things 33 times over. We're going to move on to Assembly Member Zach Polansky. We heard, actually, at our last meeting from somebody from Denmark, and we now want to ask you some stuff about options for ownership models. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and afternoon. Anthony, if I can start with you. What are the options for different models of ownership of heat networks, particularly between public and private ownership?
So, I will answer the question, but I think it's worth just setting the scene again and building on a couple of points that Charlotte has made. So, when you sit in your office or your home and you have this low-carbon waste heat, nobody's going to sit there and go, isn't this wonderful? They'll just go, what about all that disruption that was created? And digging up the roads creates a lot of disruption. But actually, it's a great opportunity if you consider that we're going to be working in the streets of London for 15 to 20 years. It's a great opportunity to bring together all of the other things that we'd like to do within the city. So we know we want to increase cycleways, we want to improve the walkways. We've got issues with drainage, so we want sustainable urban drainage and we want more trees. So I don't suggest for 1 minute, because I would say that the heat network pays for all of that, but it's a great opportunity to bring it all together. And that can't be done from a heat developer perspective on its own. We have to do that in collaboration. And as Charlotte has mentioned, doing that in collaboration with the borough or the City of London is really important. But I guess one of the challenges that we have is that councils don't have money to invest. So really, from an investment perspective, we see this will heavily be private investment. And there are lots of infrastructure funds out there that are prepared to invest if we've got the right policy environment. But there is certainly a huge part to play for the local authority in terms of being able to drive or helping to drive these projects forward successfully. So there needs to be, and certainly from our perspective, that's why we're very keen on the AZP process and we're keen on the tendered process, so that we want to go through a publicly procured process to win an area and develop it in conjunction with the authority, because we believe that's the only way that we can successfully deliver these. So that's a bit of, just thought it was worth setting a little bit of scene setting there. So from an ownership perspective, we've got over 800 networks in Europe. If I look at Sweden, 100% E.ON ownership, no ownership at all from the 4 cities that we operate in. If we move into Germany, E.ON owns about 70%, and the other 30% are owned in conjunction, not necessarily with the city, but also with the cities in that area. And it mimics the, if you like, the electricity grids that we operate in Germany. So it's 70% owned by E.ON, 30% owned by the city or the city area. From a Poland perspective, it's a similar model. 70% owned by E.ON and 30% owned by the city. Poland is the only country that we operate in where it's completely regulated. So we're learning a lot of lessons from Poland in terms of what we're trying to replicate here. We certainly see we're flexible from an ownership perspective in terms of how we want to deliver the UK networks. We certainly see, going back again to some points that have been raised, low-cost heat is really important. So we certainly need to be able to bring in not just E.ON's own investment and E.ON's equity, but we need to bring in cheaper forms of debt. So for us, where our heads are at the minute is that treating a heat network as you do other utilities, so electricity networks, gas networks, water networks, and for those to be regulated asset base, and for heat networks to be a regulated asset base, which allows us then to bring in cheaper cost of finance, because ultimately what we want to do is to bring down the cost of installing and operating our network so we can deliver lower cost heat. So we see that is an important step to help us get to where we need to so that we can ultimately compete against gas, and so ultimately we can deliver that low cost heat to the consumer and to businesses.
Thank you. Ian, moving on to you. Obviously, you're totally owned by a local authority, Enfield. What are the pros and cons of this approach?
Well, I think the models out there are local authority-driven networks. That's us. We're a private limited company, but our shareholder is the council. You could, of course, deliver it by a local authority and be a department within the council. It doesn't have to be a private limited company, but that brings certain risks. Remember, energy is not a core business for councils, and so most councils would say that, why are we putting risk into our budgets by running something that we're not seeing as core business? So why are Enfield doing it? I'll explain that in a moment. You then got a position where the local authority could be the asset owner or indeed the, let's say, the employer of the system, and then there's a concession. That's the Olympic Park and Stratford scheme. LLDC are the employer. There's a 40-year concession with Bring Energy. Bring Energy funded it. And at the end of the 40-year concession, with valuation, the assets go back to the LLDC. So that's a halfway house. And the benefit of that, I guess, is predominantly that the local authority have some level of input, some control over prices and formula. Hopefully that might not be required if regulation kicks in through Ofgem in our industry over the next few years. And then, of course, beyond that, you then got the private model, which I guess is what Anthony was referring to with E.ON. And, of course, there are partnerships in between that. So there are plenty of cities started off with a joint venture between a private partner, let's say Vattenfall, for example, is a big one in the market, as well as the city authority or local authority. So there are a number of models. I don't think any one is the right one. They all have their pros and cons. Enfield. So I was a project sponsor or director in the ODA on the Olympic Park and Stratford scheme. I watched a private sector organisation deliver a great scheme, GDF Suez, and it didn't cost the taxpayer any money. That was the real reason for going out to the private sector, so they had to fund it. But the problem I saw over the 7 years I was there as partly designer then director was that there was a lack of integration with the local authorities. So whilst we created a zone for GDF Suez to have exclusivity in the Olympic Park and Stratford, because we could, the Olympic Park, we found it very difficult to get them to connect to developers outside of the what we call exclusivity zone, because those developers had choices and they didn't want to connect to a heat network. I went to Enfield in 2013 because I believed a local authority could make a difference, in that if you set out to make planning policy heat network supportive and you make sure the documentation within the planning system makes developments build systems that are compatible with heat networks and are efficient, very efficient, then you can start to make quite a change. Then if you work with the planning department as planning applications come in and developers try and avoid connecting by their energy strategy, you can help the planning authority understand that they're having the wool pulled over their eyes by the developer, and the fact that they've looked on the London heat map and said, oh, there's no network anywhere near, doesn't mean necessarily that you can't connect. It's about the value of the connection and whether it's worth us extending. So I'm a great believer that local authorities can make a huge difference. I do think that could be replaced through legislation, through DESNZ solutions like zoning, off-GEMS regulation could help. But all these things didn't exist in 2013, and so local authorities, because I think they're trusted by the residents, they care about the residents. So having a local authority that leads is actually not a bad place to start from. If you can then influence planning documentation and ensure that planning supports heat networks, which we did back in 2014, the whole solution starts to get legs and become economically viable. We're now 12 years later. Things are moving in the right direction. I think, as I say, DESNZ, zoning, off-GEM regulation, all things that weren't in place, which made me think local authorities were by far the best vehicle to deliver heat networks for the fairness of solutions to the customers in or residents in Enfield. I still think local authorities have a big part to play. We talked earlier about zoning, and we've got zone coordinators. Why have we got zone coordinators? Because you need a local authority to be promoting to the businesses that need to change their gas boilers, or residents to say, what's the alternative? Oh, here we have a heat network. Go and talk to them before you start putting heat pumps in and suddenly lose that catalyst for us to extend into that area. So I think that local authorities have a big part to play. Anthony made one big disadvantage evident earlier, which is money. The situation in 2015 is very different to where it is in 2025. Every local authority has a debt ceiling. And if we are using £100 million or £200 million of that debt ceiling, it means they can't build houses or fund other improvements for their residents or their borough residents and businesses. So I think that you've got to accept that local authorities are unlikely to be the only solution, because you need private sector investment, and that's exactly what Enfield are looking at now for us. They're looking at private sector investment to come and support the next £100 million, £200 million investment beyond the £100 million that the council already supported. They're not funded it, but they've supported it, such that the difficult part of delivering a platform to work from, the risk, I suppose you could argue, from a market perspective, has been delivered by the council, and they've hopefully made sure that developments have been built to give us customers, although maybe not as many as we expected when we first started. And so we've got to a position now where we're not as risky. We're a fairly stable and profitable organisation. So the private sector may well look favourably and say, right, let's go and join this as a joint venture and invest more money to expand it into other parts of London. The council certainly can't do that, and in the present situation with councils, there's no way that they have any headroom to start investing more money into heat networks.
I want to say let's give the council some more headroom, but maybe let's not go there. Charlotte, the Swan Heat Network is a joint venture between yourselves and Vital Energy. Why did you choose to collaborate with another heat provider?
Sure. So Swan is one of the most complex and pioneering heat networks that will probably ever be developed in the UK. We are doing many UK firsts. The first floating water source heat pump digging in that area of central London is extremely complex. And so we felt that having our joint expertise, both Hemico and Vital's expertise together, would give us the best success in this circumstance of reaching a final financial investment decision. I think, if I may, just on the point of kind of what is the delivery model that is right for particular circumstances. I think Ian is right that there is not necessarily a kind of one-size-fits-all approach. But what I always ask when councils ask me this question is I say, well, what is it that you are trying to achieve? And if a council says to me, it's because I have money that I want to invest in heat networks for that reason, then my view would be, then absolutely you should invest. If, and it usually is that this is the reason, if the reason is because they want to exert influence and control over heat networks, then I would say that ownership and investment is not the only way to achieve that. And that can absolutely be achieved through either the consent model, which is what we're using in Westminster. So in Westminster, that means that the council will be leveraging the regulatory powers that are given to them under the zoning regulations to hold a relationship with us. They can do it through a golden share. So OPDC have a golden share with in the open network. And that golden share gives them certain rights around things like cost, carbon, expansion and consumer protection. Those are usually the 4 themes that councils do care about. And then we also have an evergreen concession, the UK's only evergreen concession with Worthing Borough Council. And what I would say is that despite those 3 very different models for ownership and governance, the way that we work with each of those councils is pretty much the same.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can I just say to members that we are almost at 3 o'clock and we still have got quite a lot of questions to this panel, and then we've got 2 more panels after that. So could I ask the guests to perhaps be a little more pithy in answers, and if we can pick up the pace a bit, I think that would be really helpful. On that, we're going to move on to strategic networks, and we're going to go back to Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you. So this one specifically, Ian, if you could answer. If we are to expand transmission networks and distribution networks across the city, who should manage and fund this?
Well, I'm not sure one person or one organisation can do that. I think that, in the models that we just explained that could exist for a network to, become an entity and serve customers, it's their job to strategise based on legislation and what they see as a financial return to ensure that they can serve customers with a financially viable solution, both for the customer and for the company. You don't want a company going insolvent. It's not like the electricity and gas industry where there's lots of people who can come pick up the pieces when it goes wrong. There's not for district heating. So I think you need to make sure that the company delivering it has got the expertise and experience in doing so. Of course, there are lots of moving parts. The biggest moving part for us is highways. So, we have to get a Section 50 licence like everybody else does to put assets in the road. And quite rightly, highways are there to try and prevent absolute chaos and have some coordination to the chaos that we create with other utilities in the roads for businesses and for residents. So I think highways is a very important component part, as is to some extent the GLA when they try and coordinate utilities together, although that is a challenge, which I'll probably cover another time. But I think that at the end of the day, to get network in the ground, highways are probably the most influential part of this in terms of ensuring that.
So I guess it goes back to the more fundamental question. So if you're installing the facility in one part of London, but actually we need to make sure that we're thinking more strategically about this and delivering to ideally every home in the capital, and it obviously is much more densely populated than other parts of the country, as Charlotte has already referred to. If we just rely on the private sector to do that, that's just isn't going to happen, is it? So, we talked about boroughs leading on that, but again, there's no incentive for one borough to have their roads ripped up to deliver, from the heat from one borough to the next borough, is there? Apart from obviously getting a bit of lane rental out of it, but. How do we make sure that we're on top of that? Anthony, I can see you wanted to come in as well, but.
Conscious of time, so I will be brief. Copenhagen, transmission main, 180 kilometres, 2 different companies, not-for-profit, connects originally 17 different boroughs. Pick that transmission main up, it stretches from one side of the M25 to the other. It won't happen, as you say, through a private company. It needs strategic oversight. It certainly needs the GLA to play a part in that. I guess whether the GLA would deliver that or not is probably not. I think for me, if I look at it, we certainly need an infrastructure for London, like we have a transport for London, we need an infrastructure for London. Certainly the private sector will play a huge part in terms of construction and building that, but we certainly need to take a different approach to how we do that.
I think just to slightly pose a different point of view to Anthony, I think actually the private sector is very willing to invest in this level of infrastructure in these transmission mains. Corey have actually just recently announced their plans to bring a transmission network through into central London, and to be clear, that won't involve enormous amounts of digging up the road. They will be using horizontal directional drilling, so similar to how we built the tubes. So you still need pits that essentially send and receive the drills, but it won't be the level of disruption I think people may fear. The way that you get these transmission networks developed is that you need to have the customers at the other end who are going to use it. The customers who are at the other end who are going to use it are networks like us, so the South Westminster Area Network, or some networks that we're developing. We've got a network in Greenwich, actually just over the river. These are networks that will essentially buy heat from these transmission networks, and then we will sell that heat on to customers. So again, I think it comes back to that: how are we driving customers to join heat networks? Because if we can address the cost of heat, get more customers to join heat networks, then the commercial imperative to deliver the transmission network comes forward. What Corey are doing is essentially recognising the kind of start of that growth of heat network infrastructure, and starting their plans to develop what is a very a transmission network that will take some time to come forward.
And Charlotte beautifully brings us on to costing and pricing, I think, with that. So,
thank you very much. We're going to move on to Assemblymember Boff now, who's going to ask about cost and pricing, as Assemblymember Foos alludes.
Miss Owen, if heat networks are effectively local monopolies, how do heat network operators decide what price to charge customers?
Yeah, a very important question for an obvious reason. I think the one thing that's quite important to understand about certainly the model that we use as a business is we are delivering what's called bulk heat. That means that we don't have relationships with end domestic customers. Our customers are predominantly non-domestic heat users, such as universities, councils, office blocks. We do sell heat to residential blocks, but it will ultimately be the managing agent or developer that is responsible for buying that heat, and then finding somebody who essentially is the retail heat provider who sells that heat on to customers. And at the point that we contract with anyone who is looking to join a heat network, at the point where we are contracting, we are not a monopoly in the sense that we are competing against heat pumps and we're competing against gas. So we're still having to demonstrate that we are providing a competitive heat solution. On an ongoing basis, we are then regulated by Ofgem, or certainly will be from 2026, from January 2026, and we operate in compliance with the Heat Trust rules. Essentially, the way that prices are set for capital, so for those connection charges and those standing charges, essentially it is a case of looking at the overall capital cost of the network, the cost of money, so the cost of the finance that is sat behind the network, and the kind of ongoing costs of replacing the assets over time, and dividing it proportionally by the people that will join the heat network. So what heat network developers do is we essentially take risk on the fact that these networks will grow over time to serve more customers. So the first customers that join heat networks are not being penalised for being early adopters. We are taking risk on saying that over time more and more customers will join that network, and we are essentially just sharing costs amongst the customers on that basis. And variable charges, which is the costs that you're paying for the actual energy that you're using from the network, that is a cost pass-through. So it is essentially the cost of us buying electricity to run the heat pumps, and then the cost of us actually having staff that are running those networks.
Thank you. And Mr. Guest, what proportion of your costs are the purchase of the heat?
There are two parts to a bill. One is the consumption of heat, and then the other is the standing charge that tends to pay for maintenance and the infrastructure. So if the question relates to heat consumption, then approximately about 30%.
30%. I'm indebted to Matt Lismore, who is a housing campaigner, used to be based in Hackney, in the Weavers' Corner, and he's shared with me some of the costs that BD Energy, which is a wholly owned local government company, and basically the cost of their service was 2.7 million, which they had to charge to customers. Only 1.2 million of that was actually the purchase of the heat, and the rest was this was all passed on to customers. He also found that 10% of what they were charged is legal costs. Don't know where that comes from. And their overheads, that is the charge that the local authority gave for administering this, was £748,000 out of a figure of 2.7 million. Do you find those figures rather extreme and difficult to explain to customers?
I think the key here is that if district heating is going to succeed, it's got to be competitive. And undoubtedly there are schemes out there that have been built to poor standards, and therefore heat losses are significant. A heat loss from a network can be up to 50%. You might find that staggering. That is fact from the Olympic Park and Stratford scheme. So we expect our heat losses to be less than 20% in total. That's to the door of the customer. That's not to the development, because development should be much less. The predominant heat loss is from the distribution within the development, getting from wherever it is on the block up to the customer's apartment or house. So at the end of the day, there is a question later about what is the cost of heat, and it comes down to the cost of input to the system. It comes down to how efficient your solution is to convert that input into hot water, how much energy you lose from that infrastructure to get from A to B, and then the fourth part is probably what's in the contract. what you're allowed to charge. Now, Energetic uses an avoided cost method. So that doesn't mean that we look at the costs to deliver and then add a small profit and say that's your charge. We look at the counterfactual, which is gas, and say what would they charge if they had a gas boiler and they had gas coming into the infrastructure and the house, and they had to maintain their boiler and replace it every 15 years. And we try and make sure we're competitive with that. But there are many schemes out there that you're illustrating which don't.
They really don't, do they? And you see, in Barking and Dagenham, in BD Energy's case, as I believe it, Ofgem's price cap is about 6p per unit, may have gone up very recently, and 30p for the standing charge per day. In Barking and Dagenham's case, it's 9p a unit and over £1 for the standing charge, and the residents have no choice.
I think you've got to ensure that when you look at the standing charge, you're comparing like for like.
Well, they're comparing £1 to 30p.
Yeah, a gas standing charge doesn't maintain your boiler, doesn't buy you a boiler, whereas most district heating companies will effectively maintain that boiler for free, repair it for free, and replace it at end of life. So it is a case of comparing apples and apples here, but I agree, there are some huge variations out there.
And don't you think the easiest solution to introduce those market pressures onto heat networks that the rest of the energy market has to have, that we should, rather than talking around all sorts of things about regulation of Ofgem probably being introduced to the heat networks, shouldn't we just implement the Ofgem price caps on all users of energy? Why is it that we've got users of energy out there? They have no choice but pay the bill. They are effectively in energy bondage. They cannot escape from their contracts. They have no control over the costs. Isn't it time we extended the Ofgem price cap to heat networks as well?
I'm happy to come in on that. I think the industry has actually supported the introduction of a price cap for heat networks. I think it's something that that probably would be welcomed by most. I think the view from government has always been that the heat network sector is complex in the sense that, as Ian mentioned, you need to make sure you are comparing apples with apples, and it is hard. I completely take your point that from the perspective of a customer, they're comparing £1 to 30p, and that is what they care about. We often say that heat is either bad or boring. People either don't care about it and it works fine and they pay, a fair price, or it's bad and they're getting poor performance and high bills, and that is a problem that needs to be solved. We certainly do have challenges when you're trying to compare a heat pump-led heat network to, say, a gas boiler, or a heat pump-led heat network to a gas-led heat network. You would generally find that charges, both standing charges and variable charges, will be higher on a heat pump-led heat network than on a gas-led heat network. And that is, again, because of the fact that being on an electrically led heat network is more expensive than being on gas, and the capital costs of a heat pump are also more expensive. I couldn't comment on the Barking and Dagenham Energy case specifically, because it's not one I'm familiar with. But
well, it's wholly local authority owned. No competition there.
Right.
Mr. Meanwell, what do you anticipate from Ofgem's new regulatory role and on the prices that you charge in your heat networks?
So we welcome the regulation. We helped set up the Heat Trust. I can't remember how many years ago that was now, and the work that the Heat Trust have done is feeding in very much into the work that Ofgem are doing. So we appreciate, certainly going back to some of the points that you've made. The regulation should help drive down or deliver consumer protection. We expect that there will also be a price cap within that. And we also expect it to drive up standards across the heat network industry. We do have a lot of different types of heat networks and communal networks across the UK, and we see varying standards within that, and you see a raft of different prices as a result of that. So it will be good to get some standardisation across the board, but it's going to take some time for that to happen. But we certainly welcome Ofgem as the regulator, and we are working, as others are, very closely with them to make sure that we're ready for that regulation when it comes in.
And what do you think heat energy suppliers should be doing, especially local authority suppliers, should be doing to address those additional costs on top of that customers have to pay for effectively bureaucracy?
So
I know some of it isn't bureaucracy. I realise that. But £748,000 out of a £2.7 million charge, that's bureaucracy.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to talk about a specific case.
I understand that.
So from a heat network's point of view, one of the things that's really important is that there is continued investment within that network to ensure that it remains efficient, there aren't many losses, and therefore prices can be kept competitive. Going back to the point that Ian made earlier, so a lot of these schemes, a lot of the communal schemes, so for example, now I want to give an example because I'll reference a certain council, they just haven't had that ongoing continuous investment in the schemes because they've had to cut budgets and they don't have the money. Now, as a result of that, then has an impact on the end user. So I don't know ultimately where that will end up, but that is an issue that does need to be resolved if those schemes are not being invested. So if I look at the schemes that we run from an E.ON perspective, we have around 70 energy service contracts in place, most of them in London. We have a long-term commitment for those schemes, most of them for a 25-year period. We have commercial models, we create our pricing on that basis, and we have to ensure internally that we've got sufficient investment to make sure that we can keep investing on those so we can keep the prices to where they need to be.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm now going to move on to Assemblymember Roberts, who's going to pick up some more questions.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, it would appear fairly early on in the meeting that many of my questions were already answered, relating to how heat networks currently compete with alternatives in terms of costs, and you went into a great deal of detail on that. And also what the government can do to make heat networks more cost competitive. If anybody has anything to add, then I'd be delighted to hear. But I think Charlotte went into it in a great deal of detail. And given the time pressures that we have, I'm happy to yield.
I think we have probably covered all of that. Yeah, I think we have. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to move on to Assemblymember also is going to leave that, in which case I'm going to move straight on to Assemblymember Anne Clark.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. I suppose this is to any one of you, but what impact will the new technical standards and assurance scheme have for new and existing heat networks in terms of reliability and costs? Okay.
Well, the cost of energy is a direct consequence of the efficiency of the network and the heat losses that the network perhaps has based on its design. So we're all expecting HENTAS to deliver hopefully what we already do. There's been obviously references to older networks and costs previously. Things had to change. I think things have changed. The CIBSE brought in CP1 to try and start to address the standards of networks, and HENTAS is taking that to the next level by going into a lot more detail and certifying networks so that people can't just say, well, I think we've complied with the standard. They are actually held to account and have to demonstrate that they have met those standards. So I think HENTAS is a good solution to try and ensure that high-quality networks are delivered in the future that are efficient. And if they're efficient, then the outturn cost to the customer should be lower, or at least competitive. I feel that we've been doing that for the last 12 years, and they're catching up. But at the end of the day, it's easy for us to set standards and deliver. But if you've got a financial model that says that's not going to work, there's obviously a tendency to start reducing standards, calling maybe value engineering. Must have heard that one. Every developer does it, and things get changed and cut. So I think HENTAS is to address that and to try and ensure that doesn't happen in the future, and that we have efficient networks that are both efficient and reliable, because at the end of the day, reliability is also a key factor for our customers.
Yeah, thank you for that. And sorry, I'm wearing my slightly wrong glasses today, so I can read my papers or I can read your names, but not at the same time. So I'm coming back to Anthony on this one. In the committee's meeting in November, the committee heard from experts about the importance of thermal stores. What are the strengths and weaknesses you have experienced associated with having thermal storage as part of your Citigen scheme?
So we have a 320 metre cube thermal storage at Citigen. So in the winter, that gives us about 2 hours of cover for the network, and in summer about 8 hours. It's really useful for a number of different reasons. So when you have thermal storage, it means that you don't need to have as much generating capacity for the peak. So that helps bring down the capital investment that's required. So thermal storage is generally much cheaper than the low carbon alternatives. So that has one benefit. And at CityGen, we have both a heating network and a cooling network. We have gas engines that produce heat and produce power, and we have heat pumps that use electricity to produce heat and cooling. And with thermal storage, it allows us to, when electricity is cheap, to run the heat pump, and if the network doesn't need the heat, then we can store it in the thermal storage. When the grid says we need electricity, we can run the engines, produce electricity, and if our network doesn't need the heat, then we can put it into the thermal storage. So it allows us flexibility, it allows us to reduce our costs and therefore pass that benefit on to the consumer. We have challenges in London just because of space for thermal storage. Significant thermal storage would be really good. And certainly the schemes that we're currently designing, we're very much looking at the size of thermal storage that we have in our Swedish network, where we have, in Malmö, we have 10,000 metres cubed, and that's expanding to 45,000 metres cubed. And that certainly gives you an awful lot more flexibility and the ability to remove gas production from your networks.
So what would it take to increase thermal storage here in London? Is it cost or also space and capacity? Or what would an increase take in London?
So I go back to the strategic conversations that we've been having earlier and reference a scheme that Charlotte talked about with Corey. Corey, as part of their transmission main, are also looking at the creation of some significant thermal storage, pit storage. So if you look at some of the schemes in Denmark, 1 million metres cubed. So about 3,000 times bigger than what we have at CityGen. That would allow them to utilise the flexibility market significantly and would help bring down the cost of heat. Because they have space where they are at Belvedere, then it's much cheaper to put that there than it is to try and put that into central London. So it's certainly, Charlotte probably knows the figures much better than me, but from a wind curtailment point of view, it certainly means that there'll be less curtailment. It means that you don't need to build as many wind farms. Storage has significant benefits, and I think some of the numbers that we're talking about that's being looked at from Newcastle University are a benefit to the system of about £54 billion.
Just before I hand back to the chair, I would like to echo what something Assemblymember Boff said, and I think it's quite interesting about the cost and that feeling. I won't name the developments because that wouldn't be fair, but I certainly do hear from residents about their bills increasing when they've moved into these properties. And I think part of the answer that was important was that with it is, they give you a boiler and they maintain it and that sort of thing. I'm not sure that's cutting through to many residents. It seems to be an ongoing concern, and the costs and the bills I've seen are very high. And I think that message isn't hitting the consumer, or if it is, it's hitting some and not others. So just to share that with you before I hand back to Chair.
I mean, I'm still concerned that we haven't managed to fit in either a visit to Copenhagen or now. It sounds as though we ought to also be going to Malmö, but I'm not sure we're going to have time during this investigation to do that. We've got one final set of questions for you before we wrap up with this panel and move on to our other guests who are going to complement what you've been talking about. And I'd like to go back to Assemblymember Polanski for those last few questions.
Thank you. It's a simple question to anyone who wants to take it first, which is what support do you need from the government and the mayor to make this environmentally and financially sustainable? And obviously you've said lots, but if there's new things, I suppose.
Thanks. I've spoken lots about cost of heat, so I won't labour the point. And I just can't quite remember if I mentioned this in my sort of opening gambit, but something that's been really impactful within London is the Zero Carbon Accelerator funding, so the ZCA. That has been enormously helpful because it allows the buildings that are thinking about connecting to heat networks to pay for consultants to advise them on how to join a heat network and how to get the best deal from their heat network provider. That ultimately goes on, it helps not just the customer who's joining the heat network, but it also helps us because it means that we have greater confidence in customers actually coming forward to join our network. So my kind of plea or request would be to keep that fund going. My second point would be, I think, to the points that both Ian and Anthony have made about the role of the GLA as a kind of strategic coordinator. Major infrastructure projects across London, I think more could be done to force or require them to adopt more joined up thinking. I'm not quite sure how you go about it, whether it's some sort of regular task force or meeting where you're sort of pulling the heads of these big projects together in a room and saying, talk to each other. But as we've been developing, in particular, the Swan network, we've identified that there are opportunities with Transport for London for us to do things like potentially locate heat generation and thermal storage within TfL sites. That's something that we're struggling at the minute to kind of push through. And we've identified that there were missed opportunities with the Tideway development to integrate plans for river source heat pumps along the River Thames. So there are kind of, I think there is a clear opportunity for the GLA to provide that strategic coordination.
Can I ask you for a prompt without putting words in your mouth, but what role would the London Plan or could the London Plan play in this?
So the London Plan has been so hugely important to driving the development of heat networks. London has the most heat networks of anywhere in the country, and that is in large part because of the London Plan and the GLA's heat hierarchy. I think what the London Plan needs to do is incorporate the zoning policy that is coming forward from DESNZ, do that in a proactive way to really identify the areas where heat networks should come forward, and then overlay that with the plans around transport, with plans around water infrastructure, and in particular regeneration as well, because actually any regeneration site, any major regeneration site that is being developed, it would be extraordinarily helpful if developers of those sites were being asked to think about, are there opportunities for heat generation or heat capture at these sites?
Thank you. Ian, is there anything you'd like to add?
Only that, from a council perspective, each council seems to be quite different in its risk appetite and its knowledge of heat networks, and sometimes they conflict. So I think the GLA has an ability to coordinate councils and to remove some of the barriers to extension through other boroughs. Enfield and Energetic have been looking to expand into other boroughs for a while, but there's definitely a political challenge between boroughs for those boroughs to allow another, let's say, network that's seen as another borough's network that might benefit Enfield residents from the profits. If there were profits, that's their biggest fear, it would appear, not decarbonisation, such that we have had difficulty getting into other boroughs because there's a suspicion about the profits Energetic would make might go back from residents in Haringey to Enfield. A bit controversial to say that, I guess, but at the end of the day, that's fact, and that's been the case for 10, 12 years now. So I think if the GLA can unlock that and try and get boroughs to work together, such that maybe the GLA has some involvement, it depoliticises the whole process, then I think that might be a big step forward.
Depoliticise sounds a very courageous step. Could I ask about pilots with that as well, if there's sufficient support right now for pilots? Maybe, Anthony, do you want to finish the whole thing off from my point of view, unless the Chair's got other questions?
I'll come back onto the pilots.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I'll just add on
wrap
to
it all up.
Yeah, and I'll sound like a broken record, and I will just confirm what Charlotte and Ian have said. So I think the GLA needs to take a strategic approach to infrastructure in London. If it doesn't, it's missing an opportunity to do the most important thing, which is to deliver low-cost, low-carbon heat to the people of London. By taking a strategic approach, it can utilise that waste heat that is available so we can get to the point where we can deliver heat that is as cheap as gas. And we can get there. But the GLA has to take a strategic approach to that. It has to do the coordination piece. You talked about the London plan. I think that what's been created through the London Infrastructure Framework is, as I said earlier, a positive step forward. And what comes out of the London Infrastructure Framework will be good to feed into the London plan. And we need a short list of strategic projects that contains heat that will start that process. I'm confident that it feels like that is heading in the right direction, but that for me is what is needed. To your second point around pilots, so I think the pilots are good, and I think we've got a number of those in flight from an AZP point of view. If I was looking for more money to be spent on doing another pilot, I would rather look at how do we take forward this strategic transmission main infrastructure that can support further networks across the whole of London. For me, that would be money well spent.
Right. Well, thank you very much to our guests for their very comprehensive answers to all of our questions. That is the end of our first panel discussion. We're going to move on to talking to some people about heat offtake from energy from waste plants and also heat offtake from data centres and getting into the nitty-gritty around specific outlets. But you're very welcome to stay. But we're just going to have a quick adjournment while we change over the panels. Thank you so much. Welcome back to the second panel of today's discussion at the London Assembly Environment Committee, and this is our second meeting discussing heat networks and zoning for heat networks in London. And we now have with us another panel. Remotely, we have Simon Woodward, who's the Business Development Manager for Barking and Dagenham Energy Limited. Hello. Who I can't see because my colleagues are sitting in my way of the screen. Hello. And then with us in the room, we have Charlotte Rule, who is the Head of Climate and Energy Policy at the ESA, the Environment Services Association, and I assume must know Jacob Haler. Yes. And then we also have in the room, and not remotely, Louisa Cardani, who's Head of Data Centre Programmes Tech UK. And last but not least, we also have Noah Nkonge, who is the heat export lead. I thought that said expert, but it's export lead from Equinix. You're all very welcome, and I don't know whether you were able to hear much of our prior discussion with our previous set of expert guests, but it's been very interesting so far. And I'm now going to move straight on to Assembly Member Prince, who's going to pick up the questions and is going to start with strategic opportunities. Over to you, Assembly Member Prince.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to you all. This is a general question. What do you see as the biggest strategic opportunities for heat networks in London, based on your sector and experience? Charlotte, do you want to kick off?
Hopefully that works. In terms of strategic networks, it was actually touched upon in the last panel. So we represent energy from waste operators. And in terms of context, there are currently 4 operational energy from waste sites here in London. One of them, the South East London Combined Heat and Power, known as CELCHIP, is currently exporting heat. The 3 others are kind of in negotiations or looking to export heat. And one of those is Corey Riverside. So they have 1 energy from waste facility and are currently in construction for a second facility, and they have substantial opportunity for heat offtake there. And they've put forward this suggestion for a broader scale kind of heat transmission system that can help to export their heat kind of across London from Belvedere, where they're located, all the way into centre of London, and giving an opportunity for different boroughs, different heat networks to kind of use that heat. So that's kind of a good example of a strategic way in which energy from waste heat can be utilised, not just from the local area, but across London.
I mean, no, I will give more detail probably from an operator perspective, but from where we see it at Tech UK is a massive opportunity, not just for London, but for the entirety of the UK. It provides, you will have heard previously, low carbon heat. It's an opportunity also to help solve some of the fuel poverty crisis we're seeing in the UK, because the UK has one of the highest energy prices in Europe currently. And from our perspective, tech plays a big role in this. In particular, data centres can, and where possible, should export heat into heat district networks.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So I'll answer from the perspective of the data centre. As a data centre operator, there's a really exciting opportunity at the Open Network, which is in northwest London, in OPDC. So that's exciting because there's a plan to take heat from data centres around the area. And I understand it'll be the first data centre heat export project in the UK. So I think that's really exciting to see data centre heat playing a part of the energy decarbonisation of the UK.
Simon, did you want to comment?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe just to explain. So Simon Woodward, I'm Business Development Manager for B&D Energy. One of the things we're looking at is how to fully decarbonise our existing scheme in Barking Town Centre. So we're looking at a number of strategic heat opportunities, including the Beckton Sewage Works. And to maximise that and actually develop that heat source, we've actually entered into an MOU with the adjacent borough, London Borough of Newham. I think what is really important to tap into these strategic heat sources, collaboration between different boroughs, whether it's energy from waste, sewage or data centre heat recovery, in order to build strategic heat networks.
Okay, my follow-on question, and I'll start with you, Simon, if that's okay. What do you feel are the barriers to expanding heat networks or supplying heat to them?
I think the barriers are many and varied. One of them is heat network zoning. is not designed for a strategic approach. It's designed for a bottom-up approach, looking at individual areas, zoning those, and then for heat network developers to find whatever local energy sources they can use. I subscribe to the Danish model where you find where those strategic heat sources are, and then you set up heat networks to maximise the use of heat from those heat sources. Another of the barrier is it's funding in advance of need. It takes a while to get those local distribution networks constructed, but all the while you need to build those big strategic heat networks, and it's a puzzle that the UK is currently tussling with, how you fund the big strategic heat lines that you need to run from those strategic heat sources to local distribution networks. And there's a number of others, but I'm conscious I don't want to hog the floor.
Does anyone else want to pick up on that one at all? Thank you, that's good. My next question is, again, to you, Simon. What are your views on the proposed approach to heat network zoning in London?
I think there's two key questions, really. Zone coordination, how that works. And I know that the GLA, the London councils and the London boroughs need to work in collaboration. But my concern is that London boroughs that I'm aware of want and need to play a role in heat network development in London. But currently the problem is that under heat network zoning, the competed consent procedure means that local authorities, if they want any involvement, would have to stand at the side of the road and then try in some way to join a competition process to actually develop heat networks in their own local authority area. We actually had a meeting with DESNZ yesterday to discuss this particular problem, with 4 London boroughs meeting and expressing their concerns. So that's just some of the issues that we've got.
That's interesting. So I'm going to merge the next two questions together. You've touched on it, but perhaps you could give us some more detail. What do you feel the role of the GLA and boroughs should be in order to make it work better, and what further support do you think the government needs to give?
So I think the GLA has got a brilliant role in terms of convening local authorities to work together. Unfortunately, in East London, we've managed to do that ourselves, but commonly London boroughs have enough to do without thinking about what happens outside. So I think the GLA have got a brilliant convening role. I think an example of a local authority taking the lead in the development of heat networks is B&D Energy, the same with Energetic in Enfield, and there's other networks in Sutton as well. So local authorities can play a role in delivery. They don't have to play the full role as we're currently doing B&D Energy. They could do it in a partnership, but unfortunately, as I mentioned, under heat network zoning, that's frowned on. DESNZ have actually, well, they originally started as BEIS in 2021, consulting to say that the local authorities would take a lead role as the heat network developer. They then pivoted in December 2023 to say that they would work in partnership. And by the time they're going to publish the consultation response, local authorities will have to compete to even develop a heat network in their area. So I think something needs to be done about that, and something also needs to be done so that we're not sort of looking down in the weeds at individual local zones. We're looking up and we're staring at the stars and looking much more at these big strategic heat sources. Other speakers have spoken about energy from waste, big Beckton sewage works. That's got 300 megawatts of waste heat. It's too big for any individual zone developer to farm on their own. It needs a collaborative approach. We're fortunate we've got the memorandum of understanding. We're working together as 4 boroughs in East London, but that doesn't always happen. And the GLA needs to take a pivotal role in convening that and making sure those networks are farmed.
Thank you. That's very interesting indeed. I think we can make some recommendations based on that, Chair. Thank you for that. Another issue, though, in relation to heat networks is around reliability and affordability. You work for B&D Energy. Where do you stand there on reliability and affordability?
Okay, so I think there is a fundamental misunderstanding which we work so hard to overcome. We are selling heat, we're not selling gas. So when you buy gas in your boiler at home, you're paying a unit gas charge and a fixed gas tariff. When you buy heat from us on top of that, you're effectively replacing the boiler maintenance and repair costs with the standing charge, or an element of the standing charge. What we do in B&D Energy is we set that overall price, what's called the whole life cycle cost, or in some terms counterfactual, to be no greater than an individual gas-fired boiler in a property priced against the current gas price cap. So that's where we are on pricing, and I think that messaging and understanding of heat, the government's done some work to try and support us in that, but there needs to be a lot more done, a lot more explained that we're selling heat, we're not selling gas, so we're not selling a utility, we're selling a delivered service, and that's really, really important. In terms of reliability, in Barking and Dagenham, on very, very rare occasions, the heat has gone down, but we pride ourselves with a very high percentage uptime. I'm involved in a number of heat networks in London. I work part-time for B&D Energy, and many of those networks I'm involved in have got a 99.99% availability. But resilience is really important. What does concern me is that even with the heat network technical assurance standard that's been brought out, it doesn't focus at the heart of what needs to be done to maintain high availability in customer supplies, looking at things like in the energy centre, resilience, redundancy in the plant, looking at proper disaster recovery plans. Not people focus on financial resilience. What they need to focus on is not only that, but disaster recovery. What happens when the heat fails, and how do we get it back on as quickly as possible? And then also strategic spares. It seems almost laughable to me that this isn't just mandated via government regulation, that each network has got to identify the strategic spares it's got to maintain, keep those on site, so when the heat does go down, they've got a really good chance of restoring it as quickly as possible.
Thank you. I've got a series of other questions. My colleague actually touched on one of my questions. In relation to BD Energy, the total cost this year apparently was £2.7 million, but £700,000 of that was on unexplained costs. But when you compare that to last year, that figure was only 200,000. Is there any reason why that bureaucracy is so much, has gone up by £500,000? Do you know?
I'm not. I don't get involved with the detail of BD Energy's accounts. I only get involved with business development. So you'd need to direct that question at the managing director, David Lewis. Well, I'm sure he'd be very happy to answer.
I think probably we both will actually. I suspect. I mean, what I don't understand though is if what you're offering is so good, many people would argue it isn't because the cost comparison, but why does there have to be a monopoly? Why do people who are signed up to the heat networks not able to choose an alternative method of heating their homes?
You've got to the heart of the matter there. The Danes call it heat networks or a natural monopoly. So in Denmark, I think 90% of Copenhagen's on a heat network, 72% of the entirety of Denmark's on a heat network. It is a natural monopoly. That's just a fact of life. You wouldn't run a gas pipe all the way into each dwelling and a heat pipe. It would just not be cost effective. I think the important thing to focus on is a fair and just price. We believe that the total overall average cost, which we set to be comparable to the whole life cycle cost of a gas boiler, as our counterfactual, which is one that DESNZ subscribed to, is a fair methodology. But I'm afraid I can't get round your question. It is a monopoly, and the Danes call it a natural monopoly as a result of this particular technology solution.
I've got one more question, Chair. So Matt Lismore, who was living in one of the properties that BD Energy provided, he had a two-bedroom flat and he was paying £240 a month. He now has a Victorian terraced house, which would be less energy efficient. He's only paying £115 a month. I'm not sure that really does justify the extra cost, the fact you're factoring in the boilers. And what are your views on being governed by Ofgem and there being a price cap?
Just to be quite clear, the latter cost that you quoted from Mr. Lismore for going into the new dwelling, I'm sure that's only a gas price, fixed and variable charges. In reality, and the government acknowledges this and accepts this, to take out a gas maintenance contract and include proper gas safety checks, you're talking about maybe another £100, £120 a year. And on top of that, your gas boiler does fail, so you have to build in the life cycle replacement cost of the gas boiler as well. And if you analyse that, I'm sure that the prices come out as fair and equitable. In terms of Ofgem regulation, I know for a fact, with my other hats on, I speak and meet regularly with Ofgem, and I have no issues at all with Ofgem coming in and regulating B&D Energy. We already have a contract with the Energy Ombudsman, so any complaints can get escalated to the Energy Ombudsman, and they, I think in all cases but one, have determined in our favour, and in that one they only determined marginally against us. So I'm confident that what we're offering in Barking is a fair and equitable service, and I've got no concerns at all with Ofgem regulation. And in fact, I support it. My only concern, and this is a real concern, and I've raised with government so many times, is that Ofgem are putting in regulation equivalent to electricity and gas regulation. Now, on the face of it, you might think, well, that's fair and reasonable. The problem with that is that 95% of the heat network operators, suppliers captured, and lots of these are in London, are actually what we call accidental ESCOs, so they're building managers, property owners, etc. They will be faced with most probably an inch of guidance and regulation from Ofgem. They will have no understanding of that documentation. They will then have to employ a consultant to explain it for them. That consultant costs money. If most of the schemes, unlike us, we operate a price promise against the counterfactual. Most schemes in London do cost recovery, so they're literally whatever it costs gets charged to the residents. So if there's some cost of a consultant to explain all of that regulation to the building owner manager and then obtain compliance, that cost just goes straight onto the resident. So in actual fact, by the introduction of Ofgem regulation, there will actually be additional customer detriment as a result of those costs. And I've flagged that up a number of times to Ofgem and DESNZ, and I've asked them to introduce a third actor. Currently, you've got Ofgem, you've got Citizen Advice, so the customer advocate, and you've got the Energy Ombudsman, who determines when a deadlock letter is issued. What you don't have is a supplier operator advocate supporter. Currently, you might think, well, surely they're all experts, they're all big people like your E.ONs, your SSEs, your B&D Energies, you know what you're doing. In reality, by number, we are a tiny, tiny number, because in reality, lots and lots of the heat networks in the UK are very small. The average size of a heat network is less than 20 dwellings. It's a weird fact, but it's true. That's because you're taking out lots of communally heated blocks. And the people who run those are not experts, and they will have to somehow navigate through that Ofgem regulation. So they need an advocate to help them do that. And currently that is not envisaged.
Okay, maybe that's something else we can take up, Chair. Thank you. Thank you very much, Simon.
Thank you. I know that Assemblymember Boff wanted to come in amongst Assemblymember Prince's questions.
Yes. Don't you think that the biggest obstacle to expanding heat networks is public confidence? I mean, BD Energy has a pretty poor reputation within Barking and Dagenham. You mentioned, we should rename this the Matt Lismore Committee, because I'm once again deferring to him as well. He says that you went on about reliability, and yet if you look at the Weavers' Quarter, he's guessing that went down up to 24 times last year. And the residents there weren't very happy with the response. And this is in addition to them having a standing charge that's much more than and I hear your explanation of the standing charge, but what's taken out of that is customer choice. There is no choice for them to do anything else. And that's why this is energy bondage. They cannot escape from this contract, and they have no control over the cost. They don't even have any kind of democratic control over the costs. And don't you think that's the biggest problem to expanding heat networks and heat network zones?
I mean, I think that's a very important set of points, but I do feel that they are going over some points that have just been made. The question was about confidence, and the previous member did not talk about reliability. It's very specific to
reliability.
B&D.
Reliability, yes. Well, so is our guest. So is our guest. And I'm just trying to say, you know, that if you want to expand heat networks, you've got to get public confidence of it. And so far, public don't have confidence in these local authority heat networks that effectively put people into energy bondage and give them no choice whatsoever.
Well, I was just going to say perhaps Mr Woodward could answer very briefly, because we have just had a very lengthy answer from him, and we have got 3 other guests I do want to hear from as well. Could you give us a very brief answer on that those points about cost and unreliability of B&D services and why that would undermine confidence?
I'm not sure I can say anything more about cost. I think I've given the fullest answer I possibly can. In terms of reliability, I'm not. Those stats that you've just quoted, they make no sense to me. I meet weekly with the B&D Energy team, and if the heat was going down as often as quoted, I'm sure you all would hear about it. But again, if you'd like to contact David Lewis, the Managing Director, he'd be delighted to share availability stats. And we have actually, I'm well aware, carried out a customer satisfaction survey. And the customer satisfaction survey has not responded in what I'm hearing in this room. But maybe best to take offline.
Perhaps we could write to you about these matters, and you could confirm the details in writing to us after the meeting, because it is very specific to that one supplier. Although I understand that's important, if that's okay. I'd now like to move on to Assembly Member Thomas Turrell, who's going to talk a bit more about heat offtake from energy from waste facilities and some other matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This first question is just to you, Charlotte, which is what potential is there for energy from waste facilities to supply heat networks in London?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So overall energy from waste, so their role is to dispose reliably of residual waste. So they operate pretty much on a 24/7 basis. It's not fully available all the time, but roughly around 90% availability, which gives them a really good opportunity to provide heat. Every year, as the Environmental Services Association, we ask our members who are interested in off-taking heat to fill in our heat network prospectus. So for each of their sites, they're able to give an overview of the technical kind of capability of their sites for heat, any technical challenges, issues, if they're doing it already. And what I can tell is, looking at the London sites in itself, the full potential is quite substantial, over kind of 2 million megawatt thermal. That is kind of without any restrictions if they're not exporting electricity as well, but that is the full potential of sites. As I mentioned earlier, there are 4 energy from waste facilities in London. Only one is currently exporting heat, and that's this South East London Combined Heat and Power, CELCHIP. They've been exporting heat since 2014, and that Bermondsey network is expanding kind of another 7 kilometres to 5,000 more homes. So that's an example of kind of the potential trying to be realised. And those other 3 sites are all looking at opportunities for expanding into heat networks. So Beddington ERF, which is in the southwest of London, is close to the Sutton Decentralised Energy Network. It's not yet connected, but they're in discussions to be connected. Up in the north of London, we have the Edmonton, the London Energy Facility, which is soon to be replaced with the Edmonton Energy Recovery Centre. That will be connected to a heat network, the Meriden Water Network, the moment it becomes operational. And then finally, we have Corey Riverside, so 1 operational facility and a second that's due to be completed in the next 2 years. And that has really substantial potential for heat, and they've put forward a number of proposals for how they can utilise that heat.
Thank you. I had the joy of visiting the Corby site, which is in my constituency earlier this year. So just following on that, if heat from energy waste plants is waste heat, what determines the price of that heat?
So there are a number of factors that go into how energy from waste prices its heat. Like most in the energy from waste sector, it tends to be very dependent on the sites themselves, but there are some overarching kind of principles that apply to all of it, so both technologically and commercially. So thinking of the site itself, where the site is located, if it needs to be retrofitted or already has a technology to offtake heat, the size of the facility, the technology as well, so if it's a traditional waste incinerator or if it's, for example, an advanced incinerator which have kind of different outputs of heat. So a number of kind of generic technical questions as to how they would price their heat. But the largest contributor is kind of commercial, and so Energy from waste, when they manage their waste, they produce a huge amount of heat that generates steam, and that can either be diverted to a turbine to create electricity or diverted to create heat for heat offtake. And so when pricing that heat, you have to take into account that opportunity cost of the kind of foregone electricity revenue. There is a term called a Z factor, so that is the amount of electricity lost to kind of create one unit of the heat, and so that is taken into account when pricing energy from waste heat. So although there are a number of technical kind of site-specific criteria, that Z factor and the electricity revenue forgone tends to be the biggest contributor.
Thank you. We're going to throw Simon into this, so it's sticking with Charlotte, but also going to Simon with this question, which is, what options are there for transporting waste heat from energy, from waste plants to different parts of London, and how feasible are they? Shall we start with Charlotte, please?
Yep, so the tried and tested method is obviously to try and utilise the networks that are nearby to the energy from waste facilities. So there are, by each 4 of those sites, there are local networks that they can look to connect to. It's in general, energy from waste operators, their role in the heat network is just to bring kind of the heat to their network boundary and then connect to any local site. So making sure that where they have the infrastructure, they can look to connect to where kind of the right site points would be. But members have been looking kind of more broadly at different options for transporting their heat. So I've mentioned the Corey transmission project, but they've also looked at a mobile heat project. So Corey Riverside is a bit unique as an energy from waste, as they transport their waste not by road but via barges on the Thames. And they've looked to see if there's a way in which they could use those barges to transport heat as well. So they have a proposal to look at kind of thermal energy stores, almost like a electrical battery, put that on a Thames, but for heat, and using that to kind of utilise some of the more central networks, for example, potentially the Swan network, and looking at ways to transport their heat beyond just kind of the classic pipes from energy from waste.
Do you have anything to add on that, Simon?
In terms of transmitting heat, no, it's. I think the technology solutions are generally through distribution networks and potentially using some kind of battery storage. And that's the two methodologies. The scheme in Sutton, just to clarify, is operational, but it's currently operational off the landfill gas engines, and we're in the process of connecting onto the energy from waste plant.
Thank you, Simon. There's just one quick follow-up of me only to you, just picking up from your previous exchange both with Assembly Member Boff and Prince. You mentioned about the standing charge and how actually that takes into account things like boiler maintenance, annual gas safety checks. Can I just clarify the position for renters then? Because it sounds like that renters renting a property on the heat network might get a raw end of the deal if they're stuck with the monthly costs of being on the heat network, but then don't get the benefits because they're not liable directly for the cost of those checks or for the boilings maintenance. So could you just quickly, very briefly, just give us a quick summary of the benefits for renters being part of a heat network, if there is any?
Yeah, so if you go onto our website, bdenergy.org.uk, and you go to the tariffs page, you'll see the tariffs all in the public domain. You'll see there's 2 sets of tariffs. One is a set of tariffs for property owners, the other is a set of tariffs for renters, and the renters pay a lower standing charge, which removes a substantial portion of that. And the balance of that standing charge is paid by the owner of the property, who would have otherwise paid for the maintenance, repair and replacement of the boiler.
Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you very much for that. We're going to move on to some questions to Louisa and Noah now, and looking at data centres. And my colleague Joanne McCarthy, Assembly Member McCartney, is now going to pick up the first set of questions, followed by Assembly Member Mahfouz. And we will also have, while that is happening, a change of chair, because I'm going to pass the chair over to the Deputy Chair at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I want to ask about data centres. We know they draw a lot of energy and need it, so it'd be good to get some of the heat they produce back. So perhaps I can start with Louisa and Noah. Can you just outline for us what are the practical challenges of matching that excess heat to the demand that we have for heat?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's quite a few challenges. There's also a lot of opportunity. The main challenges relate to timing. So, for example, new data centres may take time to ramp up to higher capacity. So the more they're occupied by their customers, the more compute, the more heat, right? So whilst, when you develop a hospital or a building, you will have a due date, a data center's capacity will amp up through time. So that creates a challenge per se, because the only way to offset that challenge is to have multiple heat providers, multiple data centers or others within a larger heat district network to make sure that that's balanced out. So timing is an issue. And then there is, of course, engineering issues around, challenges due to the fact that it's very costly to build heat district networks. Data centers historically haven't necessarily been located near one. There have been great projects such as the OPDC project in West London, which is looking at taking the heat from data centers. So those are some of the challenges, as well as the fact that data centers operate on a fairly low-grade heat. So you would need heat pumps, of course, and then there are questions around security and resilience, and such as where responsibility lies when it comes to maintenance. Data centers often require permission from their customers because they have quite stringent service level agreements, so they would require customers to agree to be part of a heat district network. So that in itself also is a challenge, albeit a contractual one. And then, of course, there's also the fact that data centers are built for 10, 20-year cycles, whilst heat district networks and the off-takers not necessarily. So again, that can be offset by having a larger heat district network with plenty of providers.
Just to build on what Louisa was talking about, I would just like to start by saying that we as Equinix, and our colleagues in the data center industry do want to make heat available. And it's just worth knowing that we can't do this alone. So yes, there are technical challenges, but it's worth just knowing that actually we need to work with partners. And that can be the heat network operators, because they specialize in taking the heat. So we need to work with them. And if they're not willing to engage in a project, it probably means the project's not viable. And then also in the scenario where there is where the plan is to export heat to a planned new heat network, the local authority has a key role in bringing the stakeholders together to the table, because oftentimes it's the lack of enough heat demand that actually gets in the way of the viability of a project. And as Louise is saying, heat export is not possible in every location. Just like heat networks, the geographically specific factors, there has to be that matching. Sometimes the amount of heat the data center has available might not be enough to justify the infrastructure investment to build a new heat network, for example. That's one thing. The other one is also the compatibility in temperatures. So the heat network operator might need higher temperatures for their business model to work as well. And then especially, and then for new build, a thing that would really help overcome challenges is getting engagement early from heat network operators, because then there's a chance to influence the design and build the capability in and put the infrastructure in. A key challenge is when we have to retrofit an existing data center that's live and operational, because it means digging up the site. And we have, as data center operators, we have commitments to our customers. So we have to maintain very high uptime of 99.999%. And so, we don't want to go digging up and potentially risk, damaging an electricity cable or a fiber cable. So that's one point. And then also, there's more congestion that you've got to deal with, just putting the pipe in the ground. So there's those sort of issues when retrofitting. And it's also worth knowing that in general, existing data centers, they have different types of designs as well. So we need to look at the specific site and understand, can you tap into the cooling system without risking the uptime of the data center? Is there space to actually put the equipment in to export the heat? Yeah, so those are some of the challenges.
Got a lengthy list there, I think. But can I ask, what does it take to ensure that data centres and heat demand are co-located? And what would help that? Would it be planning? Would it be strategic investment?
I mean, echoing what the previous panel said, local authorities and combined authorities, and in London, for example, the GLA, have a role to play because there needs to be some strategic decision-making. There is a need for infrastructure plan that takes into account all of the different players, because, as I said, heat district networks are costly to build. They often span across local authorities, and given the engineering difficulties sometimes, you need to have an overarching body that will take responsibility for having that strategic oversight. So I would say, first and foremost, you need coordination. And as Noah was saying, sometimes different players might come in from a different perspective. So the data center, if it's a new one that has already been built, knowing that there is going to be a heat district network nearby, all they have to do is plug in, which is easy. But if they don't have visibility of where heat district networks will be feasible in the future, and they are faced with delays, whether it's connecting to the grid for power, or there are delays in planning, all of these things can endanger the project further down the line.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything more to add? Yes.
Yes, please. Yeah, so in terms of siting data centre, the primary drivers are the availability of power and the price of land. So that's the sort of key driver. Of course, we would want to export heat wherever it is feasible to do so. And as you say, there is an important role for local government to play, and that can be formally through the planning system, requiring new build developments to connect to planned heat networks and bringing stakeholders together as well. Yeah, and we've seen that example, for example, we've got a project in Paris, our PA10 Paris site, where the local authorities sort of came together, were instrumental in essentially making sure there's enough heat demand and acting as an interface. So yeah, there's definitely a key role to play for local authorities.
Thank you. And with that, Chair, I'm going to pass on to my colleague.
Thank you. Before we continue, I have a little procedural announcement I have to do, which is in accordance with Standing Order 2.1, the Chair of the committee had to leave the meeting. Therefore, as a result, I will be taking over the chair for the remainder of the business. And with that, I can pass to Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you. Sounds like we're in a Politburo meeting of some sort. But, going back to your point there, Noah, in terms of the Paris example, we've talked, Louisa, you brought up the example of obviously what's happening at the OPDC. Right across my patch, across Ealing and Hillingdon, we are seeing data centres sprout out of the ground everywhere, a rate of knots. But if we go to the international examples of where this has worked well, bringing the data centres that are being developed into the district heating networks, could you give us a bit more information, first of all, on that Paris example and any others that you've got internationally, Noah?
Yeah, happy to do that. Yeah, so as I said with the Paris example, it's worth knowing, as well as the local authority playing a key role in bringing the stakeholders together, there was already an existing heat network in the region. So it was a case of extending, essentially building pipe to connect to an existing infrastructure. And that's the same case. We've got 3 live heat export projects in Helsinki as well. And it's been the case that those projects were connecting into an existing heat network as well. And the other example is in Toronto in Canada, and in that scenario the local authority was key in starting off the heat network and connecting in a range of sources. So yeah, I think the common theme is that where the heat network's already there, it's a lot easier to connect in, because data centers tend to work best as a part of a mix. It's very difficult if it's like the first and only source that the heat network is going to rely on, because it's very difficult for data centers. Data centers can't guarantee the heat that comes out of the data center, because it depends on our customers using their IT equipment. And, we're like a kind of a hotel. They can sort of pay for a room, but they don't have to stay in the room if they don't want to, essentially. So, data centers really work best as one of other heat sources.
I'll come back to the reliability point in a second, but perhaps, Louisa, are there examples where, we've talked about retrofitting quite a bit. Are there good examples of that internationally?
Retrofitting is incredibly costly, and there needs to be a very good use case. I'm going to give you an example of how things should not be done. The European Union passed the EED, that is the Energy Efficiency Directive. Being a directive, each country gets to apply it differently. Germany decided to apply it in combination with requiring data centres to plug into a heat district network, whether there was one or not. That is incredibly costly. You're building infrastructure, you're repurposing infrastructure without a real use case. And this is money that could have gone to do other things. When it comes to data centers, you know, they have quite strong environmental ESG commitments that could have gone towards other initiatives. It's worth noting that there are a lot of examples of heat export that might not be necessarily within a heat district network. Whilst that is a great opportunity, sometimes smaller partnerships can be just as fruitful. There's a lot of examples in the Nordics or in the Netherlands where low-grade heat is provided to greenhouses that are close by to data centers that might not be within a certain radius of a city, but closer to farmland, for example. It's also worth noting that a lot of data centers already repurpose their heat for their own offices, because a lot of these facilities have offices for their staff.
Thank you. If you could send us some links or more details of those examples so we can use that for the investigation, that'd be really helpful.
Sorry, just to interject, just due to time commitments on the next panel, we need to bring this section to a close in the next 2 minutes. So if this could be a final and brief question with...
Yeah, of course. So yeah, just on that point of reliability, Noah, so if there is an outage or the data centre goes down, what happens? In terms of the district
in general
heating?
or for district heating?
No, in terms of the district heating network,
yeah. So generally speaking, while I say that data center can't guarantee the heat, the profile tends to be relatively stable, and it's as a data center operator, it's in our interest to get back up as quickly as possible. And most schemes that we're working on, the heat network operator will put in a thermal store, so there will be a provision. Well, there will be a bit of time that they can use the thermal store is one thing, and they'll also be looking to put in backup as well, whether that may be e-boilers, electric boilers, for example. So there is a provision in there, but they don't want to use the alternatives because they tend to be costly either from financial perspective or a carbon perspective. So I would say that that hasn't been the issue. That hasn't been an issue when sort of negotiating these contracts. It's more the guaranteeing the availability of heat and who essentially pays for having that backup.
Thank you for those answers. Just to ask the panel, are you happy for us to write to you with any questions we didn't get to? Perfect. Yes. Thank you very much. In that case, I would like to thank all our guests for their responses. And before we move to the next session, can I ask the committee to note the report and discussion? Noted. Can I also ask that we delegate authority to Assemblymember Cooper as the chair in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from the discussion? Agreed. We'll now adjourn for 2 minutes while we change the panel. Thank you. Thank you. I would now like to welcome the Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy, Mette Coburn, MBE. He is here to speak to the committee about his recent trip with the Mayor of London to the C40 World Mayors Summit, which took place between the 3rd to the 5th of November 2025 in Rio de Janeiro. This summit was significant as it took place just before the 30th meeting of the United Nations Framework Convention of Energy and Climate Change, or COP30, in Brazil. Mr. Deputy Mayor, if given the time, if you'd like to briefly give us a summary of that meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks for having me today at the committee. It's good to see all of you here. I know we're pressed for time, but I want to take this opportunity to share a few reflections from both COP30, but also the C40 World Mayor Summit, as we're at a critical crossroads. And I want to start by saying something very simple, which is that the climate crisis is not a debate, it is a lived reality for those who've done the least to cause the climate crisis in the first place. And whilst there are some world leaders who continue to posture, to deny, to distract, and even some riding the wave of a Trump-style climate denialism, misinformation, and division in so many ways, London is continuing to lead the way when it comes to getting on with the job. We are the doers, not the delayers. COP30 should have been a real turning point for delivering climate justice, but instead it failed to deliver a deal that, for the Global South, indigenous communities, and let's face it, for low-income neighbourhoods who've done the least to cause the crisis in the first place. These are the communities whose lives and livelihoods are on the line because of a crisis they didn't create. And the failure should shame those governments that talk loudly but act little. But let me be clear, London and C40 cities are not going to wait for other cities or others to act. London is expecting change now, real systematic change, not slow progress or the incremental gestures, and certainly not the type of political theatres that we see from climate deniers. Our responsibility as a global city is not just to cut emissions, but fundamentally it's about how we lead with fairness, dignity and justice. That's why our work in London is really rooted at protecting the most vulnerable, cleaning up our air so that we make sure every child's lungs are protected, making sure that our homes are warmer so that Londoners don't have to choose between heating or eating, but also making sure that we create a good green economy where workers are unionised and we create more long-term sustainable jobs. But let's also be honest about the fundamental truth from what we saw at COP30, which is that unless we rapidly phase out of fossil fuels, we're simply managing decline. Every year that we delay the transition is another year of higher bills, poorer health, but also fundamentally deepening inequalities. Fossil fuels aren't just a climate issue, it's a social justice issue, and polluters must pay the price for the damage that they've caused. And those who are opposing this transition are only protecting the profits over the expense of everyone else. So I'm here today unapologetically as someone who believes in fairness, in dignity, but also on global solidarity. London is Eden because Londoners demand a fairer and greener city. And I was proud to stand in C40 Cities World Mayor Summit with over 300 mayors delivering tangible actions over the next 12 months. We're moving, we're acting, and our call to nations and to COP30 and to future COPs is give us the power so we can get on and deliver the job.
Thank you for that summary there, Mr. Deputy. Can I start by asking you what had been achieved by the end of C40's City World Mayor Summit in Rio that would not have happened otherwise?
Look, one of the greatest things about the C40 World Mayor Summit was you've got over 300 mayors coming from representing over 300 cities, some big, like London, Paris, New York, LA and other cities, but also some smaller cities, particularly from the Global South, that are bearing the brunt of the issues that we face across our city. And that's why when we talk about climate justice, we have to recognise that it has to be rooted in social justice, in racial justice, but also in economic justice too.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Deputy Mayor, but obviously we have a time limit on this, so we're going to need much briefer answers. So the question was, what was achieved at the meeting that wouldn't otherwise have been achieved?
So I was just coming to, Chair, thank you so much. What was great about this summit was that as well as having climate action plans that conform to the Paris Agreement, was each and every one of those mayors who came to the C40 World Mayor Summit, unlike what you see at COP, brought forward tangible 3 to 5 actions that they're going to deliver within the next 12 months. So in the case of London, we've got work around retrofitting our homes, what we're doing to make sure that London is more resilient to the impact of heat, but also fundamentally thinking about how we could clean our polluted rivers across our city, which I know also the committee had looked into previously with Member Polanski as chair too. And many other cities had lots of different actions. So what was great about this summit wasn't just high-level discussions, but actually what you saw that was cities were doers and not delayers.
Thank you, Brad. I have got Assembly Member Prince, Assembly Member McCarthy, and then Assembly Member Boff, Assembly Member Roberts, and then Polanski. Right, if we start with Assembly Member Prince, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, that was the perfect segue, Mette, into my question. Did you mention beavers on your trip?
I spoke about Justin Bieber and also Sigourney Beaver.
Beavers, not Bieber. Beavers? What?
Yeah.
The name is the Beavers, yeah.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
All right. Go on, what are they called?
We should take you to go and visit them.
Yeah, I'd love to go and visit them.
They're in Assembly Member Befuse's patch. Yeah. Yeah, I spoke about Justin Bieber and Sigourney Beaver. But look, on a serious point, and actually relating to what you're going to see coming out from the Green Roots Fund, which we had over 120 applicants, was we are looking at London around how do we accelerate nature-based solutions across our city, really recognising the importance of that, for example, beavers play. In Assembly Members Mafuse's in patch where we went to visit Paradise Field, we saw that the station nearby now stopped flooding because of the dams the beavers built. And we want to be looking at nature-based solutions, not just for resilience, but also around how we could clean our waterways. The Mayor previously visited New York, where he saw the impact that oysters are having in terms of acting as a natural filtration for our waterways. So these are all aspects that we're looking at and learning from other cities around the world.
Assembly Member McCarthy.
Well, you've nicely led into my question, which was about learning. Because obviously we share our learning, but what did you take away? Any ideas that we can implement here?
Yeah, I mean, this is the greatest thing about C40 cities, is how we actually exchange lots of different ideas. And Assemblymember McCartney, you'll be very aware about this year we had the 4 heat waves in London. The difference between these heat waves and previous heat waves is that they were for much more longer sustained periods. We know that so many other cities around the world have been suffering from extreme hot weather conditions. And one of my tasks, particularly coming out of the London Climate Resilience Review, has been looking at how do we make sure that we're adapting our buildings, but also our public spaces into what we can do to cope with heat. So I had a number of meetings in Rio with the Deputy Mayor of Barcelona, with other European cities who are also struggling with the impact of heat, looking at how do we increase tree canopy alongside our streets to really create the shade that we need on our public realm. And one of the things that we've recently done in London, working together with Kew Gardens, is actually helping support local councils around understanding the types of species of trees they need to be planting in the public realm, recognising that a significant number of those trees were damaged in 2022 with the heat waves that we had here in London. So everything from what we're doing around retrofit, there's so much that we're learning across the cities. And a key part is also, I spoke about rivers. There are other cities that a bit more have started this journey earlier than us. I met with the Mayor of Melbourne, where they're looking at the River Yarra, where they're looking at how they could clean their river. Paris, we also took part in the Swimmable Cities pledge too and signed the charter for that. And as part of that, we're working with lots of other cities as well. So there was so much, it's a shame that sometimes those things are so limited in time, because actually you can get so much more from it. But one of the things that I'm really enthused about is coming back, speaking to our officers here and also continuing those conversations with other mayors from around the world.
Thank you. Assembly Member Boff.
I was looking through the C40 plans, great organisation. I was looking particularly at the C40 Urban Accelerator, Nature Accelerator programme, and we have places like Paris in their local urban plan. They want to increase protected green spaces. Bogota wants to increase green spaces. Guadalajara wants to increase green areas. Rio de Janeiro wants to increase the quality and quantity of green spaces. Rome wants to construct new green areas. Lima wants to conserve and manage green areas. In order to fight urban heating, all these cities want to increase and protect green spaces. Why is it that the mayor, backed by Reform, wants to build on them?
I think the member needs to recognise that having access to green space and actually to a garden for many Londoners, including myself who grew up in a council estate in Hackney, is a luxury. And what we need is about equity and fairness in how do we make sure that green space across our city is actually accessible to Londoners. Because the question should be, what is the point and who benefits from the green transition? And how are Londoners benefiting from access to green space? And what we saw from the pandemic is that more Londoners grew to appreciate having access to green space. So that's why when you talk about having access to green space and when we talk about the green transition, you have to talk about social justice. Because there are lots of communities around London who don't have access to green space. So actually what the mayor is proposing...
But the mayor is reducing the amount of green space. He's cutting back on green space.
He's not cutting back on green space.
That is inequitable, isn't it, Mr. Coburn?
I think that's being disingenuous. I think what the mayor is intended to do is actually make more of that space accessible. A lot of the space that you're referring to, actually London is 47% green, in terms of green, spatially green. We have 51% if you include green and blue spaces. Over about 20% of that space is actually not accessible to Londoners and aren't nice green space.
That would hold true. That would hold true.
But it is true. It's facts.
That would hold true if, for example, Trent Park was inaccessible. It's not. It's not. It's a green area. It's not inaccessible. That would hold true if the playing fields in Barking and Dagenham were protected in some way, but they aren't. So they are.
Can I prompt a question in this?
Well, the question is, why is the mayor not following the lead of his peers in those cities and increasing the green space? Because that's the way to fight the climate emergency. Not a narrative about social justice. It's justice to everyone. The climate
I'm going to
affects
step in
everyone.
and ask the
Don't you
Deputy Mayor
think
to
the
answer
mayor
now.
should be increasing
Assemblymember
green
Goff,
space?
if we can let the Deputy Mayor answer, because I've got two more Assembly members to get to.
It's about delivering justice for communities who've done the least to cause the crisis in the first place. That's why social justice and racial justice are incredibly important to recognise in that context, because there are lots of Londoners, particularly from minority backgrounds, who've done the least to cause this crisis. And it's all about equity. And I'm coming to your point. There is no one who has invested more in parks and green spaces than this Mayor of London, than Sadiq Khan. We've created over 900 hectares of green space across our city, planted more than 670,000 trees. We have got London is leading the way globally when it comes to tackling the climate crisis, creating more access to green space. The key word here is about access. The key word here is about access, and actually what I'd hope the Assembly member would agree with me is that we prioritise access for everyday Londoners rather than having things like private golf courses that are only accessible for a few people.
Thank you. I'm going to move on now to Assemblymember Roberts.
Thank you. Good afternoon. You mentioned all the things about, cleaner rivers, cleaner air, all of that, but that's stuff that we're doing anyway. So what's a tangible takeaway, something actually that can be pointed to and say, as a result of going there, this is what we're doing, and something that couldn't have been achieved if the meetings had been, if it had been a virtual summit?
Yeah, look, I think the benefit of having these summits together in person, which, by the way, happens once every 2 or 3 years. The last time it happened was in 2022. Is that you're able to come into a room, really add the urgency that's needed to really drive forward the actions that we need. But a key part of what I took away was I also met a number of different funders and organisations who are interested in investing in London. An example is Mars Pet Care, who want to invest much more into nature-based solutions across London. We don't know whether they would, but my job is to make sure that we're getting as much as investment into London that we can. And I think the reason why that's important, and as you would have seen this from the work of the committee, is we're at a time where we need to invest much more in resilience, but we also know public sector purse is really stretched. We know local councils are struggling in so many ways, and we've got to start to look at much more innovative ways on how we can fund, sustainable urban drainage systems. How do we fund much more street trees? How do we look at this through a green finance option as well? So that's why the Mayor's Climate Finance Task Force is also going to be looking at how do we accelerate private sector investment, whether it's through bonds. I don't know. These are just some ideas around how we can get more money into resilience and nature as well. And being at C40 World Mayor Summit, learning from other cities' model is really important for us to take away, and really thinking around what we do here in London.
Thank you. Do you, don't get me wrong, I'm not a climate sceptic or anything like that, but do you see the perception issue of when you're trying to tackle, a global climate emergency, of having 300 mayors plus entourages flying halfway around the world, adding to the problem, and how that could damage people's views on the urgency, the need to address this, because it looks vaguely counterintuitive?
Look, what I would say is you have a global summit with over 300 mayors who are attending. London is the greatest city in the world. It has a seat as a co-chair of the C40 World Mayor Summit. We're talking about a very serious issue which is impacting the lives of everyday Londoners, including people right across the world. By the way, for injustices that we've caused here from the UK, I think what Londoners expect is us to be seated at the table, one, to deliver climate justice for the global south, and that's why I'm proud that under this mayor, what you've seen at C40 Cities is that 2/3 of its resources and money are now being directed at the global south, but also making sure that we're represented at the table to really accelerate the transition. Look, I'll leave you with one statistic, which is really important to note. C40 Cities, right, are cutting emissions per capita 5 times faster than the global average. 5 times faster. We've now got over 100 cities. In 2017, we had one city that conformed to the Paris Agreement. One city. But under this mayor's chairship of C40 Cities, we've now got over 100 cities that now have climate action plans that conform with the Paris Agreement. So in terms of being there, absolutely, I think Londoners expect us to be leading and actually negotiating and actually making sure that we're setting the example for what we can do to accelerate the climate crisis.
Okay,
thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assemblymember Planksky.
Thank you. You just mentioned the Paris Agreement, which is the 2030 target. We had a budget committee the other day of the Fire Brigade, but this is across all budget submissions, where people are openly talking about they're now going for the 2050 target and there is a funding gap for the 2030 target. How do you see the pathway to getting to 2030?
Look, I think targets are really important, Assemblymember Polanski. When I was a councillor and cabinet member in Hackney, and in 2021, when we set the target for 2040, 2030 for Scope 1 emissions, of course, the Mayor here set the target for 2030. I think what it does, it drives the machine. If you don't have these earlier set targets, then what then happens is the organisation relaxes, the sectors relax in terms of what their efforts are. Now, obviously, there are challenges, and we've lost a lot of time under the previous government when it comes to thinking about how we're retrofitting our homes, thinking about resilience, thinking about green finance and green economy and good green jobs. But I think what's really important is that we stick by our 2030 target, give it every shot that we have to make sure that we're driving down emissions. And if we didn't have that 2030 target, progress would have been much more slower. And I'm really proud that here in London, we're driving down emissions.
I think the rhetoric's right, and I'm pleased about the emissions reductions. But, OK, let's look at the Fire Brigade. The Fire Commissioner was really clear that 2030 targets just weren't going to be possible without additional funding. Now, that's not the Fire Brigade's fault. And actually, if I'm honest, it's not the Mayor's fault either. But what I'm not hearing is you or the Mayor say to national government publicly, we will not hit our 2030 target without specific funding that will fund this transition.
Look, I think the other thing is to say is, just an answer to your question, is when you have these targets, right, there's a number of things. So firstly, as you rightly recognise yourself, we're not going to have the answers to all of this. When we declared a climate emergency, we didn't immediately know what the pathway was, right? Because we know that, firstly, the way government and London government, GLA, London Council set up, wasn't designed to reach 2030 in the first place. So there are lots of questions to be answered. Second of all, there's obviously a funding gap. Thirdly, there's issues around, we know that there are new innovations and technological innovation that's coming out that's going to help accelerate that. What I think the 2030 target does is get the organisations thinking differently, still recognising that there are challenges, but thinking differently about how they're going to overcome those challenges. So in reference to London Fire Brigade specifically, yes, there may be specific challenges that they've identified, and that's a good thing. The fact that we now know that there's a gap, that's a good thing, because that's what the target brings out, the gap. Now what it does, it moves the organisation to think about, right, what is the solution for us to filling in those gaps, both in terms of funding, but also organisational structure. And that's obviously for them to figure out, working together with the Mayor of London.
So we declared a climate emergency, I think, in 2019 from memory. It was around 2019, 2020. What's to stop in 2030 as not hitting those targets, but the narrative being, well, it was always just a kind of an idea, as opposed to here is the concrete plan to get to 2030?
Well, we've set out a plan that we believe needs to happen. Of course, the GLA by itself, in terms of the emissions that it sort of contributes to, and what the Mayor has control over, it's not possible for us within our own powers to be able to deliver that for the whole of the city. We need others to act, whether it's around the private sector, whether it's Londoners, whether it's the government, previous governments. What we're focused on is about specific tangible actions that we can take. The other thing that I just want to say here, which I think is really important in this context, is, and I often speak to lots of Londoners, look, I make no secret, I'm not a traditional environmentalist, right? To be quite frank, even when I first became a councillor, I never used to really think about the environment as a number one issue for me. But I only grew to really understand it because I saw communities around me who are more impacted by, seeing my parents with their energy bills increasing year in, year in because we're dependent on fossil fuels. And every time something happens around the world, who's paying more for it? It's working class Londoners. So I think sometimes when you speak to Londoners and you talk about the climate crisis, I think sometimes it feels really overburdened. Right? They can feel like, what can I do? Go pick on the big fossil fuel companies on these streets. But we're not just doing this because we have to save the planet. Of course we have to, otherwise none of us will be sitting having this conversation. We're also doing it because fundamentally, why wouldn't you want to live in a city, for example, where we can breathe much more clean air? We've already seen the news, amazing news, incredible news, that when the Mayor first got elected in 2016, if we'd done nothing and carried on the same way, it would have taken 193 years. For the first time this year, Londoners are now breathing clean air thanks to the bold leadership of the Mayor of London, at a time where so many people, other mayors around the world, have rolled back from clean air zones. Why wouldn't you want to live in a city where you've got more access to green space?
So welcome to eco-populism. It's good to hear that it's catching on. But the question more specifically is, why would private sectors do their bit if we weren't, as the GLA or the Mayor more widely, making sure we're hitting our 2030
because
target?
I think it's in their own interest. Don't forget, people who work in private sectors are people, right? If you want to have a workforce that is more productive, you need to make sure that they're working in conditions that has better air quality.
That sounds like the Mayor's saying, let's look to the private sector to lead the way as opposed to us.
I'm going to have to intervene just because of time. We've got another Assembly member to come in, and so I have to try and make sure we get round the table. So, Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you. I mean, just on that point about the LFB, actually, one of the challenges they were talking about were in terms of outside of their control. So, trying to get electric vehicles when you're very specialist type of vehicle that you need to operate is obviously a challenge. But your question as to the value of you attending going to Rio, you're saying there were 300 mayors there from across the globe. Clearly, London is a globally leading city in terms of tackling the climate crisis. We know our role and responsibility there. What sort of message would it have sent to the rest of the world had the Mayor and yourself not attended?
Look, I think it's a very important question, Assembly Member Mahfouz, and I think we live in we're at crossroads right now. One of the reasons why we didn't get what we wanted out of COP was because of the absent leadership of the United States and the fact that we have so many people, other leaders around the world, who are riding the wave of Trump's climate denialism. And I think what we're here to say is that the world needs leadership. It needs leaders to step up and show actually how the green transition is benefiting everyday Londoners. And actually, what we're saying is that cities are much more closer to its people, understand the needs of its residents, and understand the needs of our local economies, and how do we make sure that the green transition works for everyday people. And so our message to leaders that came out of C40 cities is, we're doers, not delayers. Give us the devolution that we need, the powers that we need to really accelerate the transition that Assembly Member Polanski was speaking about, but also give us the funding that we need so we could just get on with the job because we know how to do it.
And just on that funding, clearly we've got the Green Routes Fund, which was launched for this year. We've got the Green Finance Fund, which is ongoing. Have you picked up any lessons in terms of how we could potentially amend or change those for future years to get the best out of them?
Yeah, in London Climate Action Week this year, which was the biggest ever London Climate Action Week, doubled in size, over 45,000 people, literally the Glastonbury of climate weeks. One of the key things that the Mayor announced is our new Climate Finance Task Force. And that was because we already seen in London, we've got a successful London Climate Finance Facility, over £1 billion that we've raised, funding incredible things like the London Stadium to have 3,200 solar membranes through the Green Finance Fund, which is cutting energy bills by about 10-15% for London Stadium. But what we need is scale. If we want to realise the green jobs that we need for Londoners, to really really hit that equity and fairness piece, we need scale. And so what we've set up, and actually I had the first meeting last week together with the task force, is a Climate Finance Task Force together with the Green Finance Institute, working across public, private sector, getting all the brains around the table to tell us what we need to do to really accelerate that transition. By the way, this isn't a unique challenge for London. It's a challenge for cities all around the world. London is already leading the way in terms of green economy. But what we're hoping through this this Climate Finance Task Force are tangible, recommendations to the Mayor that we can move forward to act, but also hopefully inspire other cities.
Very, very quickly, very important debate. If you could help settle it for us. Guarana, any good? Worth tasting?
I couldn't possibly make the diplomatic crisis any worse, so I'll pass there. But from the Mayor's own views, it is an incredible drink. Once you tasted the non-zero version, yeah.
Thank you, Matt. We have successfully got you finished on your 4:45 cut-off, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So with that, I'd like to thank the Deputy Mayor for attending today and for his answers to our questions. We've just got a couple more bits to wrap up, so you're free to head off if you want.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion around it? Noted. Can we also delegate authority to the chair of the committee in consultation with party group leagues to agree any output arising from the discussion? Thank you. Can I ask the committee to note its work programme for the 25-26 Assembly year? And then the date of the next meeting. The next meeting of this committee is scheduled for the 8th of January 2026 at 10 a.m. in the chamber at City Hall. Perfect. I have no other urgent business, which concludes today's meeting.